Chapter 357, Amethyst Thorned Island 8. Oh! It turns out that she is actually that renowned fourth Miss Sue. No wonder. I heard she stole her older sister's fiancé, infuriating her sister so much that she set up a life-and-death duel on the spot? This also happened. Really can't see it from her clean and neat, pretty little appearance that she actually could do something this immoral. She would even steal her own older biological sister's fiancé? For some time, many people talked and whispered about topics ranging from the Amethyst Thorned Island to life-and-death battles. Su Luo's hearing had always been good. After being promoted to the third rank, it became even sharper. Thus, every word that was said reached her ears. She actually didn't expect that within a short month's time, the public opinion would all become in favor of Su Qing. It made her reputation spotless and white as a lotus flower, also turning her into the victim, while she became the ruthless and vicious woman. Su Luo thought about it and couldn't help but feel that it was too funny. These rumors, if there wasn't someone secretly guiding it, she definitely would not believe it. As for who that person was, Su Luo only smiled and did not speak. Su Luo grabbed a small ball of fish bait, placed it on the fish hook, and cast her fishing line into the sea. After all, this was her first time fishing, thus, even with her intelligence, her movements had a few problems. Therefore, this became another area the people could criticize her on, finding fault with even the tiniest details. Tut! Can't even cast a fishing rod. How can she catch an amethyst thorn fish? Does she think that the amethyst thorn fish are the same as other kinds of fish? That's right, that ball of fish bait is way too big. How can she use so much? If the amethyst thorn fish really bites it, then that would be strange. Just with this level of ability, and she still wants to compete with the crown prince? This is so embarrassing as to lose face all the way to her maternal grandmother's family. No need to predict the outcome of the competition. I can tell you now, His Highness the Crown Prince will definitely win. These bystanders watching the spectacle all forecasted and vowed that Su Luo would lose. The corner of Su Luo's mouth rose slightly, her attention focused on the surface of the sea. She completely ignored the nearby numerous disturbances. The Crown Prince had heard all the negative comments towards Su Luo. He calmly cast a glance at Su Luo and mockingly said, "If you manage to hook even a single amethyst thorn fish, this prince will." Before he could finish, suddenly, the mocking smile on the Crown Prince's face stiffened, because he saw that the fishing line on Su Luo's fishing rod was being dragged downwards. This was the sign that a fish had bitten the hook. Everybody nearby became excited. OMG, it took the bait, it took the bait. How is that possible? Wasn't this line only cast merely half a minute ago? How was it half a minute? It hasn't been less than 10 seconds, right? That being said, this luck is a little too good, right? Faced with these incoherent, excited voices, Su Luo merely smiled faintly. She carefully reeled in, then lifted the fishing rod for a closer look. On the fishing line was hooked a lively, jumping amethyst thorn fish. This amethyst thorn fish was much bigger compared to the one before. It was about 2 adult palms long, and there was a faint purple spirit power being emitted from its whole body. With just one look, you could tell that its age was not young. Not waiting for Su Luo to put it down, Bei Qining had already run up like a lackey, diligently helping Su Luo take the amethyst thorned fish's mouth off the hook, and happily giving Su Luo a thumbs up. Older brother's wife is so amazing. Continue on with this persistence, and eliminate that fucker. Who are you calling a fucker? The Crown Prince was just feeling depressed, and again hearing Bei Qining chattering happily not far away annoyed him to death. He gave a heavy snort, and sent a cold glare at Bei Qining. Whoever answered, that's who it refers to. The clever Bei Qining quickly avoided the trap in the Crown Prince's words. If Bei Qining had answered that the fucker mentioned was you, then that was just covertly admitting that Bei Qining, he himself, was the fucker. Chapter 358, Amethyst Thorned Island 9. The Crown Prince set up this trap, and believed from the bottom of his heart that Bei Qining would be taken in. This way, he could seize the opportunity to ridicule him, instead of always being ridiculed by him. Unfortunately, Bei Qining wasn't fooled. The Crown Prince was infuriated to the point that the temple on his forehead started to pulse. He angrily and loudly shouted, "Get lost!" Bei Qining merely held the amethyst thorn fish and strutted around in front of the crown prince. What's the point of bickering? If you have the ability, let's use strength to talk. You should also hook a fish for me to take a look. Su Luo saw that these two were about to fight again, and somewhat helplessly placed her hand on her forehead and shook her head. She pinched off a small ball of fish bait and put it on top of the fish hook. Once again, she cast the fishing rod into the sea. On the other side, Bei Qining and the crown prince still hadn't finished arguing. The sounds of surprise once again arose from this side. Oh heavens! It moved again, the fishing rod moved again. This is impossible. How can it be like this? Isn't the amethyst thorn fish very difficult to catch? Don't tell me that this year's amethyst thorn fishes are especially dumb? Especially easy to angle for? You are especially dumb. Just now. It's not like you didn't fish for it. Why did you become stupid? Obviously, the fishes are slipping away like a thief, so slippery that they won't stay in your hand. But that's not right. The fourth Miss Su clearly is hooking them very easily. Then, did you see the crown prince hook an amethyst thorn fish? Nangong Liujue immediately stopped quarreling and looked over at Su Luo. He only saw her effortlessly pull up the fishing rod, and that another lively, frisky amethyst thorn fish was hooked to her fishing rod. He was simply gaping in shock. His entire person was flabbergasted. This is impossible. How could there be someone who could catch 2 amethyst thorn fishes within less than a minute? What did she take an amethyst thorn fish as? An ordinary kind of fish. That was a full of spirit power and intelligent amethyst thorn fish. Take him as an example. If he was able to hook one in 20 minutes, it was already considered extraordinarily great. But this loathsome girl's luck was good to this extent? 2 fishes within 1 minute. 2 fishes. The crown prince was itching to yell out loud, "You are cheating," these 3 words. However, logic told him, why would it be cheating to catch amethyst thorn fishes? No matter what methods you use, being able to hook one was considered good. Su Luo glanced faintly at the crown prince. In her eyes appeared a smiling expression that didn't reach their depths. Does the crown prince not have a single fish yet? This is not normal, you must try harder. A sentence that was as light as a feather, but was like a heavy fist, was ruthlessly thrown at the crown prince's face, knocking him dizzy. The crown prince's malicious gaze swept a glance at Su Luo and coldly said, "Don't celebrate too early. The outcome of this competition hasn't been determined. There will be a time for you to cry. Then just wait and see. See who is the person that will cry when the time comes." After Su Luo had placed the fish bait properly, she very casually tossed the fishing line into the ocean. Other people who wanted to hook an amethyst thorn fish, every step of the process, they must be cautious, careful, and concentrate on the task completely. They still had to throw all the spirit strength in their body onto the fishing line, always paying attention to whether the fish bait was bitten, afraid that if they were not careful, the precious amethyst thorn fish would be gone. However, with Su Luo, whatever so-called professional techniques were non-existent. She just casually threw the fishing line, and afterwards, she would hold the fishing rod, waiting for the fish to take the bite, then hook it easily just like that. It simply made those so-called professionals, who were proficient in various techniques, stare with their eyes wide open. In the beginning, everybody was using a tone of making fun of her to mock her that her way was not right. But Su Luo used reality to ruthlessly strike back at them. In less than a few seconds, Su Luo's fishing line once again sank a little. Now, all the people surrounding them were so excited that they had gone practically insane. Fish, fish. Again it bit. Heaven. Oh heavens. Oh. Chapter 359. Amethyst Thorned Island 10. The surrounding spectators were nearly shocked into a daze by Su Luo's show of skill. How could this be? This was simply impossible, alright? Too unimaginable. In less than 2 minutes, there was actually someone who could continuously hook 3 amethyst thorn fishes. And each were bigger than the last one? Yet clearly, they had also tried their hand at fishing before. All of them knew just how very, incredibly difficult it was to catch these amethyst thorn fishes that were full of intelligence. At this moment, The crown prince was staring stupidly in a daze at Su Luo, entirely uncertain on how to react, except for the involuntary twitching of his cheek, which betrayed how at a loss he felt. This? The crown prince pointed at the water surface in shock, asking Su Luo in a daze. Just what kind of devilish method did you use? Su Luo calmly glanced at him, raised an eyebrow and smiled vaguely. Devilish method? Crown prince should demonstrate it for us to see. Slandering people is wrong. Talking nonsense without evidence. Others will say that the crown prince cannot afford to lose. You are such a loathsome girl. The crown prince's eyes became bloodshot, wishing he could swallow Su Luo alive and whole. This loathsome girl's words seemed like they were polished with poison. She was simply carved out of the same mold as Bei Chening. Loathsome girl, is insulting whom? Nangong Luyan nonchalantly swept a gaze at him. His pair of eyes were cold and threatening. He bore the dignity of an elite, powerful master from head to toe. The crown prince immediately felt as if he had fallen into an ice room, and stiffened all over, stammering speechlessly. Abominable. The crown prince clenched his fist by his side, hating the fact that despite having the same status as Nangong Luyan, he had always lost under that profoundly enigmatic gaze of his. Currently, the not-so-distant Anya Ming and Lan Xian had noticed the commotion over on this side. They couldn't help being somewhat curious. Lan Xian was even more so, and directly beckoned a servant over. What? Catching 3 amethyst thorn fishes in under 2 minutes? How can that be possible? Lan Xian leapt to his feet. Due to being too excited, even the chair behind him had toppled over onto the ground. Anya Ming was also shocked to a standstill. Although because of Nangong Luyan, he had thought of Su Luo more favorably. But he had never expected that the girl's performance would actually go beyond expectations. This was simply unimaginable to the extreme. In this group of people, they could also be considered among the top, catching no more than 2 or 3 fishes under an hour. But that girl, Su Luo, actually accomplished an hour of their efforts in under 2 minutes? This was something only a 10th ranked or above expert could do. Right. Even if their father's generation were to undertake the task, they might also not be able to catch 3 amethyst thorn fishes within 2 minutes. Could it be that hooking an amethyst thorn fish was no longer related to a person's cultivation levels? Simply inconceivable. Go. Let's go see it for ourselves. I don't believe that girl can really do it. Lan Xian was deeply unconvinced, grabbing Anya Ming, and with a turn of his head left. Anya Ming merely laughed bitterly as he shook his head. Under the gaze of the crowd, with so many eyes watching it happen just a short distance away from them, how could it be false? It was just that Anya Ming was also curious. He couldn't wrap his head around how that girl Su Luo could have done it. The crowd bustled about. Every one of them was filled with excitement, and the pairs of eyes watching Su Luo fixedly simply held all kinds of complex emotions. Shock, astonishment, envy, jealousy, and hatred. Many kinds, but most of them were still envy, jealousy, and hate. Su Luo indifferently swept her gaze around her surroundings. Just now, these people were still vowing that they predicted that the crown prince would win. She had merely hooked 3 fishes, and it was enough to make them this excited. Then, if she were to hook a few more, would it not drive them all mad? Chapter 360, Amethyst Thorned Island 11. Su Luo smiled faintly and deftly cast the fishing rod into the sea again. This time, almost everyone was eyeing Su Luo's fishing rod. The many pairs of eyes stared, as if wishing to bore a hole into the sea's surface. Under the scrutiny of many extremely excited gazes, both of Su Luo's hands remained as steady as a rock, without a single shred of stage fright from being observed closely by everyone at the scene. There's a bite. Su Luo was secretly delighted as she casually pulled, and it was another lively and flopping amethyst thorn fish. The duration for this time, just as before, did not exceed half a minute. It seemed as if the amethyst thorn fishes were already waiting beneath the sea, just waiting for Su Luo's fishing hook. The speed of capture simply could not be any faster. Seeing this scene, Anya Ming's expression flashed with a threat of surprise. Fast, it was simply too fast. Lan Xian's reaction was even more obvious. He stared at Su Luo in a daze, both eyes filled with disbelief, and him right now simply did not know how to react. though he still did not believe the words of a bystander. But now he had witnessed with his own eyes Su Luo casting the fishing rod. In merely a blink of an eye, what she pulled up was an amethyst-thorned fish. It was basically as if countless amethyst-thorned fishes were trying to outdo each other, waiting to take the bait. This was simply as if those amethyst-thorned fishes were as obedient as domesticated animals reared in her home. This girl was simply too miraculous. Originally, Lan Xian still found Su Luo to be questionable. Now, he used an admiring and even a worshipful expression to stare at Su Luo. He was itching to lunge over and cling to her thigh, to beg and ask her how she had accomplished it. Following that, Su Luo once more pulled up an amethyst-thorned fish. Everyone present was seething, but they all remained silent. Everyone was gazing with worship at Su Luo, as if she was a goddess. They all held their breath with rapt attention, watching her every move very carefully. Su Luo felt goosebumps rise on her skin from those stares. She secretly guessed, was her own performance way too outstanding? Seeing Bai Qining about to move in, Lan Xian, who was a step faster, joyfully pounced forward and helped unhook the twisting amethyst-thorn fish, which was struggling to escape. He gave Su Luo a silly smile as he took the chance to get closer to her. "Sister-in-law, tell me, is there some mysterious secret to this fishing rod?" It was not just Lan Xian who wanted to ask. Currently, everyone at the scene all wanted to question her. Consequently, following this question, everyone's gaze all concentrated onto Su Luo's face. Those pairs and pairs of eyeballs that were bright as snow converged together. How astonishing the resulting effect was. Cough, cough. Su Luo lifted her fist to the side of her lips and coughed lightly, while in passing, she casually handed her fishing rod over to Lan Xian. "Why don't you try it?" The secret was in the fish food, but the fish food was handed to her at that time by Lan Xian. Therefore, Su Luo was very certain that Lan Xian's attention would definitely not be on the fish food. Lan Xian did not expect Su Luo to be so straightforward. He skeptically accepted the fishing rod, appraising it all over before again, giving Su Luo a suspicious glance. Su Luo shrugged. "Isn't it you who don't believe my abilities to fish? Who felt that the secret was in the fishing rod? You take it, try it yourself, and you will find out." Lan Xian was really obedient, and took out the fish food he carried with him. He carefully added it to the fish hook, and stealthily cast Su Luo a glance. He was unable to tell from her facial expressions, and thus thought it was suspicious. Afterwards, with single-minded devotion, he used the fishing rod, casting it towards the sea. Following Lan Xian's action, everyone's gaze fell sharply upon that floating tiny fishing line. If it was truly capable of hooking the fish, then this fishing rod. Nearly everyone's gaze looked covertly at the fishing rod, desperately wanting to snatch the fishing rod immediately for their own. Because, if it was truly proven to be this fishing rod's doing, then, without a doubt, in an instant, it would become recognized as a godly device and become the target of every competing force in the world. Chapter 361, Amethyst Thorned Island 12. Su Luo leisurely and carefree sat by Nangong Luyuan's side. She was contentedly nibbling slowly on snacks. Nangong Luyuan, while laughing, helped her wipe her hand, saying in a gentle voice, "You would even con Lan forth, you are indeed too bold." Lan Xian, ranked number 4 in his family's direct descendant of the younger generation. Normally among close friends, he was accustomed to being called Lan Fourth. Lan Fourth, he had another nickname of lazy to death. This child usually was the laziest. If he could lie down, he absolutely would not sit. If he could sit down, he absolutely would not stand. If it was not for the unending amount of elixirs and medicinal pills, he might not have the level of martial arts cultivation he currently had. A streak of crafty smile flashed across the corner of Su Luo's mouth. Naturally, it was he himself who insisted on testing it. What does it have to do with me? Besides, before, although Lan Fourth was all smiles, and had an affectionate manner towards her since the beginning, that pair of eyes had a judging and examining gaze. Su Luo was really fed up with it, able to retaliate just a little to shock his superior attitude. As the child of a super-influential aristocratic family, why not go for it? Nangong Luyuan's large, Warm palm was placed on top of Su Luo's head. He indulgently, and in a spoiling manner, kneaded her head. He then lifted an eyebrow and smiled. You are not willing to eat even a little loss. However, this king simply loves to death this little temper of yours. The Nangong Luyan standing in front of her had a face that was extremely handsome, as if naturally sculpted from brilliant jade. His facial features were picturesque, eyes like stars with a high and straight nose bridge. His moist lips were red as vermilion, setting off his alluring charm. Just one look could draw you in deeply, and you'd never be able to shift your gaze away. Su Luo shifted her gaze away with great difficulty, turning her head away and disgruntledly said, Hold your tongue. There are so many people here, talk less nonsense. Speaking nonsense? Nangong Luyan's thick, jet-black, beautiful eyelashes swept up slightly, and his phoenix eyes also looked up. They had a kind of mesmerizing all living things quality that was alluring and enticing. A light smile hooked up at the corner of his mouth. His scarlet lips were red as blood. Good, good. Then this king will tell it to you again in front of everyone's face. Come Nangong Luyan, while saying this, was about to pull Su Luo up, making everyone's gaze look over to where they were. Su Luo's heart immediately was anxious. In front of everyone, he was going to reveal his love for her? How outrageous. Currently, she was already the target of many, okay? Su Luo hurriedly threw off his hand and said, full of an imposing manner, Nangong Luyan, you shut up now. If you dare say it, then I may just bury you. Bury this king. Nangong Luyan raised an eyebrow with interest. His pair of eyes narrowed with dangerous rays of light. His red lips hooked up, as enchanting and gorgeous as fire. Not good, she incited a disaster. Su Luo's heart was vexed. She shook off Nangong Luyan's hand, and her body had already acted before her brain. At this moment, she had already leapt into the crowd like a burst of wind. In a flash, she disappeared from in front of Nangong Luyan. Nangong Luyan looked at that quick, nimble, leopard cat-like agility, and his pitch-black eyes were as deep as a lake. If his little Luor was just a little more foolish, a little more stupid, a little less gifted, then he wouldn't have such a difficult time chasing after her. Lan Xian had already held that bamboo pole for about half an hour. Originally, he was full of expectations. Now, his heart was disappointed and had given up all hope, because he was able to perceive, when his fish hook was cast down underwater, there was indeed a school of amethyst thorn fish circling around. Yes, that's right, you guys did not hear wrong. There really was a school of amethyst thorn fish enveloped in brilliant rays of purple. It formed a dense black mass, striving for first, afraid to be last, advancing waves upon waves in this manner. But what was strange was that these amethyst thorn fishes roamed and looped around the fishhook for a few circles. Afterwards, in twos and threes, they wandered away, in a simply disdainful manner. Lan Xian now was so depressed that he was about to spit out blood. Clearly, it was the same fishing rod, the same fish food. Why was it that when switched to him, it would be this kind of treatment? Chapter 362, Amethyst Thorned Island 13. Why was it that when Su Luo angled, they would vie for first and were afraid of being behind, but when it was his turn, they would all disdainfully fling their heads and swim away? This made him so depressed as to nearly spit out blood. He was hurt as deep as the Pacific Ocean. Sister-in-law Lan Xian had a wanting to cry but lacking the tears expression as he gazed at Su Luo. His tearful, peach blossom eyes were brimming with rays of light, appealing for help. What? Su Luo exasperatedly answered. How could Lan Xian tell her that beneath them, the school of amethyst thorn fish that was assembled with great difficulty had all run away from his handling? Could he say he was avoided by a huge school of amethyst thorn fish? He felt that this was really embarrassing, and he simply wanted to cover his face. Lan Xian's teary eyes were gleaming with unshed tears as he stuffed the fishing rod into Su Luo's hands. Sister-in-law, you come and do it. Under thousands of staring eyes, if he cast again, he would have lost all his dignity. Now the expression he looked at Su Luo with was not judging, but rather looked hopeful and with starstruck eyes, full of adoration and worship. Su Luo's attitude towards him changed into one that showed satisfaction, and in passing, She took the offered fishing rod. She smiled faintly and said, "I've come, so I'll do it. Each and every second now is a green-colored crystal stone. Can't afford to waste it." Once Su Luo said these words, the crown prince's complexion immediately blackened. Wasn't what Su Luo said implying that the more amethyst thorn fish she caught, the more tragic his loss would be? If, like before, the crown prince would still haughtily lift his pronounced high-arcing chin bone, then give a cold humph, and say that wasn't it merely a few pieces of green-colored crystal stones? How could this prince not be able to afford it? But, with the increased knowledge of Su Luo's speed in hooking an amethyst thorn fish in a few seconds, how could the crown prince still have that kind of confidence? Him right now was so frightened by Su Luo, until he nearly cried. This was what kind of goddamned speed? Following this, if her angling speed was all at a few seconds per fish, then even if you sold his entire fortune, it was not enough to compensate her. The more the crown prince thought, the more afraid he became. His heart was extremely panicked, now. He was regretting it until his intestines were green. He wished he could give himself a few huge slaps. If it weren't for him insisting on going over to provoke Su Luo, wanting to go look down upon her angling speed, how could there be these matters that occurred afterwards? It truly was shooting himself in the foot, and not being able to live anymore. Not mentioning the crown prince's intense and unstable state of mind, and solely speaking of Su Luo's side. It seemed she had really made a firm resolution to have the crown prince lose everything. In the moment it took for her to cast her fish hook into the sea, those amethyst thorn fishes that had avoided Lan Xian and left, once again encircled that thin strand of fish line. They were outdoing one another to peck at that round fish bait. Owing to the rush for it, it was too fierce to the extent that when Su Luo pulled up, goddamn, some people were so excited that they started to curse on the spot. This was too freakishly unimaginable. This time, it wasn't one fish, also wasn't two fishes. That very small fish hook actually had 3 fishes, 3 amethyst thorn fishes. This was simply the biggest miracle since the beginning of history, an unprecedented marvel. Who fucking said that hooking an amethyst thorn fish was harder than ascending to the sky? Who fucking said that amethyst thorn fish were very nimble? Who fucking said that an average of 1 fish in 10 minutes was already at the level of gods? Take a look at her. 1 fish in a few seconds. 1 fish hook could actually catch 3 amethyst thorn fishes. Moreover, each fish was not that small, and at one glance, you could tell that the fish were the bravest or strongest among the school of amethyst thorn fishes. The mass of people standing in a circle watching this scene were exceedingly envious. Their pair of eyes were bloodshot, itching to rush up and take these 3 amethyst thorn fishes for themselves. They wished they could immediately be reborn as Su Luo, just fling a fishing line, and would catch a string of amethyst thorn fishes. This would simply be too fucking pleasurable, don't you think? Even looting couldn't be this fast. 1 amethyst thorn fish was equal to 1 green-colored crystal stone. It was just like a living treasure for cultivators and practitioners. Now the crown prince's complexion was exceptionally ugly, so gloomy and overcast that you could squeeze out droplets of water. Chapter 363, Amethyst Thorned Island 14. Su Luo's gaze swept past him, seeing him about to lose his cool. She sent him an even more taunting sentence. All at once, the crown prince will give 3 green-colored crystal stones. This will make the crown prince spend some money. I'm truly sorry about this. A mouthful of blood was stuck in the crown prince's throat. Spit couldn't spit it out. Swallow couldn't swallow it down. It was really choking him until his complexion was ashen. Both of his eyes were scarlet red, and his hands were trembling. Bei Qining had always had complete rapport with Su Luo, a flawless partnership. Seeing this, he happily added another knife stab. Sister-in-law, you need not be anxious on the crown prince's behalf. Within his magnificent palace far from here, there are many treasures. He's not afraid of being unable to afford to lose. In the worst-case scenario, we could just carry everything away, including that magnificent palace of his. The stuff in the magnificent palace had taken the crown prince more than 10 years to collect. Inside were countless number of treasures that would simply shock people. The crown prince's pair of scarlet red eyes glared at Bei Qining. wishing he could throw himself on him and choke his neck. This busybody, even if he didn't speak, nobody would think he was mute. Su Luo nodded her head in approval. Oh, this time, I feel reassured. Otherwise, I was afraid that the crown prince could not afford to lose this amount. So much so that I didn't dare to let go and fish with my all. Sister-in-law, you are simply too kind-hearted, too admirable, too charitable. Bei Qining made a big fuss over the littlest things, then exaggeratedly gestured and danced for joy. Finally, he again kind-heartedly consoled. But you really ought to let go and have free rein to fish, otherwise, the crown prince will question the fairness of the competition. The crown prince was almost about to vomit blood. If that loathsome girl uninhibitedly fished, why wouldn't he question the fairness of this competition? The crown prince was almost about to howl out this sentence. If that loathsome girl let go and fish, his magnificent palace would not enough to pay for the loss. Su Luo cast a glance at the face of the crown prince that was about to pass out. Her face was full of surprise and said, so it seems good intentions still did bad things? Looks like I really need to feel relieved and boldly fish. Otherwise, the crown prince is certain to be unhappy. Lan Xian, who was at the side, when he heard their unself-conscious dialogue, he was practically speechless. Afterwards, Lan Xian and Anya Ming exchanged a glance. Both of their eyes had a forced smiling expression, and they sighed helplessly in unison. Who said that now? The only person at a loss was the crown prince himself. Both of them were also very regretful, all right. Now the both of them, without exception, wanted to complain against Nangong's strategic methods. This busybody for sure had already known that Su Luo had this ability earlier. So in the beginning, Nangong just one-upped them in a match. He manufactured a kind of she doesn't know how to hook an amethyst thorn fish facade, making them lower their guards and feel too embarrassed to ask for a single amethyst thorn fish that she, a little miss, would catch. As a result, they both made a solemn vow to decline her catch. Now when they saw Su Luo pulling the fishes up one by one, they were also very envious watching this, okay? They almost wished that time would flow backwards and return to that time when they were on the boat, so they could rightfully and boldly request Su Luo to also hand over her amethyst thorn fish catches. Bei Qining smiling happily, bumping Lan Xian's arm once. Hey, didn't expect that sister-in-law would be this awesome, right? Now regretting until your intestines are green, right? Shut up. Lan Xian hatefully glared at Bei Qining. Arrogantly and with frailty, he turned his face away, but facing the wind was the same, as two broad lines of tears appeared. So many amethyst thorn fishes, originally, it should be divided evenly between him and little Ming. A blunder, a giant blunder, all conned away by Nangong, that big cheat. Really, just thinking about it made him have a heartache. Lan Xian exaggeratedly covered the place over his heart, and cast a faintly blaming glance at Nangong Luyan, who knew that this guy was not even a little bit sympathetic. Instead, he returned a glance that was full of an imposing manner, indifferently saying, What? What other could be there? Admiration, envy, regret, hate, etc. These words were easy to say, but they didn't sound good. Lan Xian could only wretchedly, silently and secretly be bitter, as he once again turned his head away. Chapter 364. Amethyst Thorned Island 15. Since the beginning, Su Luo had already calculated everything well. This time she must swindle the crown prince fully and well. So, she never had any intent to hold back. Following the passage of time, one after another, the amethyst thorn fishes were hooked by Su Luo. Sometimes one hook had 2 fishes, and other times it had 3. Moreover, every time the bait was taken, it would absolutely not exceed 10 seconds. It was almost like, once the fish hook was cast, it would always be like pulling up a string of fish. This scene simply made all the surrounding people extremely stimulated. A lot of the people covered their chest, unable to stop shaking their head, expressing that they had been overly shocked. The crown prince saw Su Luo's unbroken succession of casting down a hook to pull up a fish, and the muscles on his face continuously twitched and trembled. He was completely unable to suppress it. His pair of eyes were both rigidly watching Su Luo, staring fixedly, from his former astonishment, shock, and disbelief, to now fury, regret, and about to lose his head because of fear. The majestic, stately crown prince, who seldom ever lost his head from fear, bestowed this honor on Su Luo. How could he not be alarmed? This was one amethyst thorn fish, which was one piece of green-colored crystal stone. The market price for one piece of green-colored crystal stone started at 5,000 gold coins. However, you must often raise the price to 10,000 gold coins before being able to buy one. If she was just catching them one by one, then it was still unlikely to frighten the crown prince to this degree. The problem was that each time, Su Luo was pulling up strings of fishes. This simply was totally absurd. The crown prince heavily slapped down on the back of the chair. The nice, sturdy chair was instantly turned into dust. The large noise created by the crown prince immediately attracted the attention of a lot of people. Alas, the pitiful crown prince this time. I'm afraid he will lose all the way to his maternal grandmother's family. Oh dear! Who would have imagined that this miss from the Su family would be this amazing? These amethyst thorn fish seem as if they were reared in her home. They say it is still the crown prince who first went over to provoke her, right? Oh, that's true. If it isn't the crown prince himself going over to provoke her, why would she compete with him on this? What is this called? This is called to sin against heaven is permitted, but to sin against oneself, one cannot live. Hush, not so loud. Don't you see that the crown prince's face is already green? Careful not to let him spill his fury over onto our bodies. Momentarily, everyone's tongues were wagging. Originally, in the beginning, practically everyone had predicted that Su Luo would be the one to suffer a crushing defeat. But now, under Su Luo's accepted bullying strength, since then, the wind of that public opinion blew simply in the reverse direction. All the unfavorable rumors blew towards the crown prince. The crown prince was already infuriated to the extreme. Then to hear these rumors blowing in the wind, he was almost nearly driven mad. His gloomy face, with a very fierce malicious gaze, swept a circle in front of his eyes. Places that were watched at by his gaze. Everybody was unable to speak and frightened, lowered their heads. They were afraid that if they were not careful, they could accidentally bump into the muzzle of a gun. Su Luo saw the crown prince's panicked expression, and she became even more enthusiastic when fishing. Now, that little wooden bucket of hers was already replaced with a super large wooden barrel, since a long time ago. Su Luo measured the super large wooden barrel with a glance, frowned slightly and again looked at Bei Qining. Looks like this wooden barrel also won't fit anymore, right? The smiling expression on Bei Qining's clean face was exceedingly brilliant. Seeing this, he vigorously nodded as if taking credit for something, and he happily smiled. Sister-in-law, look, what is that? Su Luo followed along his gaze and looked, and saw that from their own luxurious yacht, a row of sailors came down. Every two of them formed a team. Every team was carrying a super large wooden barrel. She gauged that those barrels were sufficient to hold a volume about the size of 2 adults. Su Luo roughly counted, and found that there were about 10 of them. For a moment, she was truly somewhat speechless. The crown prince saw that row of wooden barrels, and the muscles on his face twitched and trembled even more violently. Chapter 365, Amethyst Thorned Island 16. Bei Qining had always fought with the crown prince, and won equal share of his limelight. He had never stood on the overwhelming side of victory like today. Everything here was all credited to Su Luo. Therefore, his feeling of adoration for Su Luo sprang up unbidden. Thanks to this, Lan Xian and Bei Qining fought over who unhooked the fishes. Therefore, in order to raise efficiency, Su Luo arranged it as followed, making her fishing flow like the course of a stream of running water. Lan Xian baited the hook. Su Luo cast the fishing rod and reeled in the fishing line. Bei Qining, meanwhile, unhooked the fish, coming like a running stream of water and immediately promoting the efficiency to its peak. Often within less than 10 seconds, they could smoothly catch a wave of fish. The crown prince expressed his objections, but his objections were very quickly overruled. The mass of people standing around watching were already dumbfounded by this scene, while more and more people came to watch. Some people basically had no inclination to fish themselves. Some smart people also came over with a fishing rod to squeeze for a position to fish, thinking that a little of Su Luo's good luck would rub off on them too. However, these people did not know. Exactly because of having Su Luo's fish food as contrast, their fish food were even more disdained by the fishes, and so they were even more unable to hook a fish. This was called being too smart for their own good. 1 hour had passed. 2 hours had passed. 2.5 hours had passed. Beichening looked at the time, and in the last second yelled, "Time's up!" As a result, both sides laid down their fishing rods and allowed the referee to examine the result. This examination of the results was really entirely focused on inspecting Su Luo's catch, because the Crown Prince didn't hook even a single fish. The root cause being, 1. His mood was unstable. 2. He had given up from despair. And the most important third reason was that with Su Luo's fish food as contrast, it was therefore even more impossible for the Crown Prince to hook a fish. All the amethyst-thorn fishes went over and were circling around Su Luo's fish hook. Therefore this time, his success was the most rotten since the beginning of history, harvesting 0 fish. That's right, the majestic and stately Crown Prince unexpectedly didn't even catch 1 amethyst-thorn fish. This was simply the greatest blow to him under the heavens. Maybe the Crown Prince also felt that it was quite disgraceful. From beginning to end, his face was black. His face was paralyzed in an expression of wishing he could execute everyone using death by 1,000 cuts. Come. Now we will count how many amethyst-thorn fish Miss Su hooked. Ha! Everyone is looking forward to it, full of curiosity. Everyone really wants to know how many fishes are great benevolent, bursting with good luck Miss Su hooked in the end, right? Beichening, in the role of referee, didn't have even a little of a referee's awareness. Once his thoroughly disparaging and provocative words fell, everyone's zeal and enthusiasm was all mobilized, making everyone completely overlook the Crown Prince. Beichening, Lan Xian and Anya Ming. These 3 originally aloof, distinguished young masters and descendants of aristocratic families, had now been transformed into little brother-like servants. They were all over there, helping Su Luo count the fishes. After checking the numbers, Lan Xian and Anya Ming exchanged a glance. Both of them had their hands over their chest, with bitterly grieving expressions of being repeatedly regretful. Afterwards, they both looked towards Su Luo wretchedly. Looking at those little sad expressions, it really made a person want to take pity on them. However, after experiencing Nangong Liuyun's honey traps, this trick was already entirely useless on Su Luo. Beichening very smugly cast a glance at the Crown Prince, happily and smilingly saying, "Nangong Liujue, do you want to know how many green-colored crystal stones you lost?" The Crown Prince's complexion right now could be described as deathly pale. His hands hidden in his sleeves trembled non-stop, making even the sleeves shake slightly. As a nation's Crown Prince, this kind of essential quality of the heart was really unacceptable. Beichening appreciatively stretched out the Crown Prince's panicked expression. Only then did he slowly give a sigh and very kind-heartedly told him. Chapter 366, Amethyst-Thorned Island 17. Beichening laughed loudly. According to the recently checked numbers, Nangong Liujue, that's 1,500 heavenly amethyst-thorn fishes. That is to say you owe 1,500 green-colored crystal stones. Ha. Beichening tucked his hands at his waist and laughed wildly on the spot, simply too pleased with the result that he couldn't handle it. Yet, the Crown Prince's face turned green in a split second. His figure swayed, nearly unable to stand steadily on his feet. It was not only the Crown Prince, at this moment. The people that were there watching all sucked in a huge breath of air, practically on the verge of fainting. 1,500 amethyst-thorn fish? 1,500 pieces of green-colored crystal stones? The Crown Prince had truly lost miserably. Not to mention the Crown Prince, even the whole Eastern Ling capital might not be able to pull together that much within such a short time, right? Everyone was anxiously gazing at the Crown Prince, inquisitively sizing him up, not knowing what he would do. When Beichening saw the Crown Prince's black face that was like the bottom of a pot, he walked over and patted him on the shoulder, very kindly consoling him. "Isn't it just 1,500 green-colored crystal stones? For you that's a very simple matter, isn't it?" Simple your ass. The crown prince gave Bei Qining an indignant and harsh glare. If it was 150 green-colored crystal stones, he would still be able to sell things and pool it together, and more or less be able to scrape together enough. But 1,500 pieces? They might as well just kill him directly. The crown prince flung back his head and directly spouted out one phrase. Don't have it. Bei Qining laughed more craftily than even a fox. So many people are staring intently at you, Nangong Liujue. You really have the nerve to renege on the debts? A crown prince that doesn't have any credibility worth talking about is not a good crown prince. In the future, this will become your biggest obstacle to ascending the imperial throne. Our Beichen family will be unlikely to consent to you occupying the top seat. You, the crown prince, glared furiously at Bei Qining. Would this person die if he didn't oppose him? Would he die? Our Lan family also will not consent. Lan Xian used one hand to lean on Bei Qining's shoulder, guffawing while gazing at the crown prince. The Anya family will also not approve. Anya Ming, with a smile that was yet not a smile, raised his eyebrow and gazed at the crown prince with interest. You all. The crown prince had not thought that these people would actually stick their head out for a no-name loathsome girl, and the rage in his heart became even more rigorous. Actually, what he was most furious about was if at that time he had not withdrawn from the engagement, that loathsome girl would be an object in his possession. Then today, this great number of amethyst thorn fish would be his, all his. Now he wouldn't be in this situation of being pressed for the repayment of debts and practically put on the spot. Rather, he would be in reaping it in during this harvest season. So long as he thought of this, a stabbing pain would throb unceasingly in the crown prince's heart, hurting so much that he nearly could not breathe. Finally, the crown prince gave a hateful glare at Su Luo and yelled at Bei Qining. Even if you want your payment, it shouldn't be right now. This prince doesn't carry that many green-colored crystal stones on me. Bei Qining nonchalantly waved his hand. Not a problem. Wait until after returning. We will naturally come to find you to pay it back. If you still won't recompense in full at that time, naturally, we will then go call upon your father to demand repayment, seconded. Lan Xian happily said while raising his eyebrow. Seconded +1. Anya Ming also, while smiling splendidly, watched the crown prince. These people abominable. Simply too abominable. The crown prince angrily flung his sleeves and grandiosely led a group of people away. Bei Qining consoled Su Luo, saying, Sister-in-law, don't be afraid. This debt, naturally we will get it back for you on your behalf. This time, if we don't make Nangong Liujue bankrupt, then my last name is not Beichen. Su Luo smilingly nodded her head. Then that's really great. If it was me, I wouldn't be able to get this debt back. Bei Qining adoringly looked at Su Luo. In the end, sister-in-law is still the most capable one. I've been contending with him for so many years, yet this is the first time I've seen him lose this badly, this depressingly. Ha ha ha. I'm truly happy to death. Chapter 367, Amethyst Thorned Island, 18. Su Luo smiled and instructed people to carry all the amethyst thorn fish onto the luxurious yacht. The sky darkened but was not completely black. The line of sight was unclear and hazy from the rising moon. Suddenly, a person among the group of people cried out in alarm. Look, what is that? Everyone's gaze turned to look in that direction. One could only see a white shadow appearing on the sea surface. It seemed really close, but at the same time really far away. It was rocking and flickering, and couldn't be seen very clearly. However, Nangong Liuyan's phoenix eyes narrowed slightly, a trace of surprise appearing in his eyes. When his gaze turned and landed on Su Luo, a smiling expression was at the corner of his mouth. This girl's luck. Maybe she really was the illegitimate daughter of the goddess of fortune? Even this kind of rarely seen, once every 100 years' fortuitous meeting, was encountered by her? Really didn't know what he ought to say. That is. Bei Qinying's eyes flashed as if simply in disbelief. He turned his gaze towards Nangong Liuyan, as if wishing he could confirm something. So arcane. Lan Xian had an extremely astonished expression on his face. He was so excited that he was immediately about to burst out with obscene language. Both of his hands were even tightly clenched into fists, so excited that he almost couldn't control himself. Inconceivable. Too inconceivable. Anya Ming's eyes narrowed slightly. He gazed deeply at the white shadow that suddenly appeared in the distance. He repeatedly shook his head and sighed. Su Luo somewhat doubtfully swept these three a glance. What was going on? Why were each and every one of them looking at that white shadow on the sea surface with expressions of longing, aspiration and hope? Their eyes also had a tint of seeing something mystical? Could it be related to some inside information that she didn't know? Go board the yacht. Nangong Luyan raised his sleeves and very naturally led Su Luo along. He brought a group of people and grandiosely walked towards the yacht. Not limited to Nangong Luyan's group of people, almost all the people present had discovered the peculiar thing on the sea surface. Those smart people had already boarded their yacht earlier and sailed towards that white shadow with flying speed. Along the way, there were constant yells from people, with heart-tearing, lung-splitting, screaming voices shouting out something called Amethyst Fish Palace. Amethyst Fish Palace? What kind of thing was it? After returning to the yacht, Su Luo asked this question like a very curious baby. However, just after she asked, she was collectively looked down on by everyone. Bei Chening was simply helplessly at a loss with her. Sister-in-law, did you live in a vacuum for the 10 or so years before? You actually don't even know about the Amethyst Fish Palace. Lan Xian meticulously and carefully looked Su Luo up and down, holding his chin and pondering with a harboring evil designs expression as he leaned close to her. Sister-in-law, 100 amethyst thorn fish in exchange for the answer, deal? I order you to go away. Bei Chening directly lifted away Lan Xian, who was trying to take advantage to loot her. You Lan Fourth old man's mouth is really expensive. A matter that takes merely a sentence, and your asking price is actually 100 amethyst thorn fish. Sure enough, Bei Chening was a good child. Su Luo waited for him to clear up her confusion. Unexpectedly, once Bei Chening cast Lan Xian aside, he himself leaned in close to Su Luo, and while smiling happily said, Sister-in-law, I'll give you a 20% discount. I'll only take 80 amethyst thorn fish. The corner of Su Luo's mouth twitched. She held her forehead and looked towards the sky. This group of foolishly cute people. Su Luo immediately gazed towards Nangong Luyan. Bei Chening was just about to console Su Luo, with that Nangong Luyan would never say these superfluous words. But Nangong Luyan only pulled Su Luo by the hand and helped her sit down properly, full of interest and fiddling with her slim fingers, then softly told her. Amethyst Fish Palace is related to the amethyst thorned fish. Almost every 100 years, it would appear once, therefore drawing out all the experts from all directions, who would fall over each other in their eagerness to come. Also every time it's practically a bloodbath. Nangong Luyan really suspected that this time, the appearance of the Amethyst Fish Palace might have something to do with Su Luo catching large quantities of amethyst thorn fish. A bloodbath? Su Luo blinked her eyes with some misgivings. Nangong Luyan rubbed her head. A heavy and imposing manner flashed across his expression. Chapter 369, Jade Lake's Fairy 1. She was unlike other aristocratic families' women that would immediately show her haughtiness on the surface. The Jade Lake's Fairy cast an indifferent gaze at Su Luo. A pure, shallow, smiling expression appeared on her face. Miss Su is also here. Su Luo smiled. Yes, what a coincidence. The two people finished greeting each other in a manner that was neither warm nor cold, and didn't speak again. At this moment, from behind the Jade Lake's Fairy body, walked out a man. One could see him stand with his head held high and upright. His body was tall, straight and slender, appearing impressive with a loftiness that was out of the ordinary. Especially that pair of eyes, extremely sharp like a hawk, glittering like frost and snow. They had a grandeur that intimidated others and overwhelmed people. He swept his eyes over the surroundings once with a sharp, hawk-like gaze that completely ignored Su Luo. Apparently, in his eyes, Su Luo was merely an unnecessary existence, as insignificant as an ant that he could single-handedly crush to death. Oh, Li Aofing one! What wind managed to blow such a great holy Buddha like you here? Bei Chening folded his arms over his chest and cast a glance at him with a ghost of a smile. Li Outyan, as the name implied, his haughtiness soared to the skies. His conduct and bearing were very proud and aloof. This person would boast in that the social circle of aristocratic families. His talent was unsurpassed. Normally, he was arrogant and seemed aloof from politics and material pursuits. Beichen Palace and Jade Lake Palace were opponents from afar that often competed. The two palaces' relationship was always complicated. Therefore, Beichening was always rude towards Li Outyan. Li Outyan indifferently shot a glance at Beichening and gave an icily arrogant snort. With regards to Beichening, who was at the same level as him, he was still unworthy of his attention. Li Yaorao gave Beichening an apologetic smile. My second elder brother's temperament is usually like this. You should also know this. By all means, don't take offense. The corner of Beichening's mouth lifted into an arc and he absent-mindedly said, Younger sister Yao Yao is apologizing. As the older brother, I naturally have nothing to say. Come, sit down so we can talk. In this play, he was merely a warm body to use as placeholder. The real lead still needed to be handed over to Nangong. And watch how he was about to act out this play well. In Beichening's eyes shone a burning radiance. His pair of peach blossom eyes were full of a gossiping overtone. Li Yaoyao very naturally sat down at Nangong's left side. Quite familiarly, she coiled around Nangong's arm full of smiles, her smile showing off shallow dimples. She subtly said in a low voice, Today, third senior brother is here to catch amethyst thorn fish. You must have won an overwhelming victory. Su Luo's gaze dwelled on the Jade Lake fairy coiling around Nangong Liuyan's arm, that very familiar manner, as if the two of them were frequently like this. Somewhat like a male-female pair being protected and whatnot, as if they were not affected by the world. Nangong's gaze was demonically charming. He raised an eyebrow and smiled. Then, he shook his head enigmatically but did not say a word. Su Luo noticed that Nangong Liuyan hadn't resisted Jade Lake Fairy's intimacy, and he also didn't push her away, she who was coiled around his arm, indulging in closeness. The two people spoke, acting as if nobody else was present. Their voices were so low as if sharing a secret between them, with a manner that was so close that nothing could come between them. The man was handsome beyond compare. The woman was exceedingly refined. With one glance, it could be seen that they were a pair of jade annulus, a couple that was a match made in heaven. The scenario appeared to be framed by a screen, isolating those two people in their own world, while others all became the landscape that set them off beautifully. Su Luo withdrew her hand quietly from Nangong's large palm, but this time, Nangong Liuyan didn't insist, to the extent that Su Luo was easily able to withdraw her hands. Seeing their intimate manner that left no space for others to squeeze in, seeing Nangong Liuyan's intoxicating eyes pampering and spoiling gentle feelings for her, a bitter smile emerged in Su Luo's heart. Her gaze turned away towards the ocean in the distance with its surging momentum. 1. This was either a typo by the author for Li Outyan's name, or Beichening was being sarcastic and changed the Tian sky to Feng wind in Li Outyan's name to go with what he was saying. Chapter 370, Jade Lake's Fairy 2, Nangong Liuyan. Beichening said you seldom open your heart and treat someone well. Did you know I believed it? A little bit. Just short by a little bit. I would have started to like you. Short by just a little bit. As expected, the safest way was to strictly guard one's own heart. She must not lightly hand over her heart. Su Luo. Ah, Su Luo. Have you forgotten the painful lesson from the previous life? Now you still want to follow the path to disaster? Fancy that you still call yourself someone who had lived 2 lifetimes. You actually couldn't even see this reason clearly. A self-deprecating bitter smile played across Su Luo's face. A lonely and pained look flashed through her eyes. Beichening noticed that although Su Luo's face was unaffected, yet her tranquil, deep eyes were like condensed frost. His heart felt somewhat apologetic, and giving a clear cough, interrupted the two people's intimate heated chat. Yao Yao, younger sister, you guys also appearing is too coincidental, right? We only just discovered the Amethyst Fish Palace, and you guys just happened to come over? Jade Lake Fairy paused. Her smile was shallow and pure, mysterious and charming. Venerable grandfather predicted that there was unusual movement on the East Sea, and calculating the time, figured it was extremely possible for the Amethyst Fish Palace to appear. As a result we came. A simple short piece of dialogue broke off that vague, charmingly and gentle atmosphere from a moment ago. The orders of grandfather shows he is truly quick-witted and clever, worthy of being called Jade Lake Palace's sea-stabilizing divine needle. 1. A position no one is able to shake. Bei Chenying's smile was not quite a smile. The Jade Lake Fairy smilingly started to chat with Bei Chenying. Oh, that's right, you guys came to fish for amethyst thorn fish, right? Did you hook some? Let's roast some fish to eat, what do you say? Lan Xian cast a quick glance at the Jade Lake's Fairy. Bei Chen's buttock was beaten to pieces by his old man, so he remembers his lessons. Where would he still find the courage to eat it? The Jade Lake's Fairy appeared to have recalled something, then covered her vermilion lips, and was consumed by laughter. This emotion and this scenery, Su Luo's eyes slightly narrowed, it gave her an illusion of being outside looking in. With just that one topic, the Jade Lake Fairy was able to lead them to their youthful years. This kind of being excluded feeling that was saying, all of us are childhood friends that played and grew up together, with everything being understood among us. Whereas you are merely an outsider who shouldn't even think of coming in as an interloper. This made Su Luo feel somewhat uncomfortable. Lan Xian saw Su Luo's expression was dim, and he smilingly approached her. Sister-in-law, you still haven't heard of this awkward incident of Bei Chen's, right? Come, 100 amethyst thorn fish. Lan Xian had not yet finished speaking, before the Jade Lake's Fairy cut in first. She protested coquettishly and slanted a glance at Lan Xian. What nonsense are you saying? You haven't even looked to see if Miss Su could even hook 100 amethyst thorn fish first? Even one fish is unlikely, okay? And you still ask for so much like a lion with its mouth open wide. Only after she finished, did she become aware that she might have said too much. So, she smiled towards Su Luo. Miss Su, don't take any offense. I was merely stating the truth, there wasn't any intent to look down on you. If she didn't say anything, then it was not that bad. Once it was said, it seemed even more like she was trying to cover it up, but was just making it worse. If it was to be said that the Jade Lake's Fairy was merely inserting a sharp knife a moment ago, then the sentence just now was like pulling that knife out, and at exactly the same place, she stabbed the knife in deeply once again. At this moment, Bei Chenying, Lan Xian and Anya Ming, all three of their complexions were slightly strange. Bei Chenying gave an even clearer cough, and tilted his head away. He really couldn't steel himself to the task of telling this story, in order to strike a blow at Li Yaoyao. Su Luo smiled lightly, expressing that she didn't care, and then nodded towards Lan Xian. You speak. This showed she agreed to this business transaction. In any case, Su Luo girl was rich and imposing. It was merely 100 amethyst thorn fish and nothing more. In front of her type of rich, conspicuous spender, what did a mere 100 amethyst thorn fish count as? If he was to take a little, she still would have a fortune left. Lan Xian's heart was immediately jubilant, and he shifted towards Su Luo's current position. One sea-stabilizing divine needle, the backbone or pillar that held the family up. Chapter 371, Jade Lake's Fairy 3. Thus, Lan Xian sold Bei Chenying's awkward incident without any hesitation nor guilt. One could only see him covering his stomach and laughing heartily for quite a while. Finally, he slowly began to speak. Sister-in-law, you may not know at that time we were still kids. Bei Chen family was celebrating his father's birthday, and we all followed our elders and went to Bei Chen Palace. That year, there were people gifting amethyst thorn fish to congratulate him, and indeed, that amethyst thorn fish's size was truly huge. That fish was about several hundred years old, and it was almost going to become a mystical spirit. At that time, Bei Chen's old man was extremely happy, and was saving it in preparation for other important uses. But several of us, being underaged and ignorant, stole that amethyst thorn fish, ran behind the mountain and roasted it. Explaining up to here, Lan Xian paused, as if the things that happened afterwards were too funny. And again, he covered his stomach and started to laugh uproariously with ow, Ow ow sounds. Anya Ming couldn't stand it any longer. Are you still going to tell it or not? If you won't tell it, then I will. It just so happened that he could split that 100 amethyst thorn fishes in half. Lan Xian, with one hand, pushed Anya Ming aside and seized the opportunity to sit by Su Luo's side. Smiling, he continued to explain it to her. Afterwards, this matter, we naturally were unable to conceal it. After Bai Qinying's old man found out, he was infuriated half to death. Bai Qinying's elder uncle was even more straightforward. He dangled little Shadow, one, back home, and was going to beat him with a wooden plank. At that time, the few of us were extremely scared. In the end, it was Nangong who came up with a plan. Can you guess what method he came up with? Beat with a wooden plank? But with Nangong there to come up with a plan, very likely, this scene of Bai Qinying undergoing corporal punishment, Bai Qinying would not be eating a loss. Su Luo smiled while shaking her head. Lan Xian had a worshipful expression as he said, "For sure, you would not have imagined it. Back then, nobody knows where Nangong stole a fresh piece of meat from the magical beast iron-armed ape. He stuck it firmly to the back of Bai Qinying's, but consequently, when Bai Qinying's elder uncle struck down with the plank, immediately, Bai Qinying's little boat was saturated with bloodstains. It was a carnage with blood and flesh flying. Right away, it frightened Bai Qinying's elder uncle until his face was green. Ha 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 ha, she didn't expect that the current them, where each and every one of them were full of noble aura, would be this naughty in their childhood. Su Luo seemed very interested and asked, "And afterwards?" Afterwards, Bai Qinying's grandmother's heart was so distressed and regretful that she almost swooned. Completely disregarding the full house of guests, she immediately lifted her walking stick and chased after Bai Qinying's elder uncle around the courtyard, while hitting him with her walking stick. Bai Qinying's old man was not careful, and was also hit a few times. Ha 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 ha. Recalling this awkward incident at that time, Lan Xian held his stomach, laughing until he almost started to roll around on the ground. Having gone through Lan Xian's period of impromptu comical material, the stiff atmosphere eased up somewhat. Su Luo couldn't help but have a little more of a favorable impression of this lively Lan Xian. She felt that he was a good kid, and decided to gift him a few more amethyst thorn fishes for free. The Jade Lake's fairy naturally knew this entertaining story more clearly than Su Luo. What she noticed was not this story per se, rather, how Lan Xian addressed Su Luo. Lan Xian inadvertently said sister-in-law. Perhaps, he didn't even remember it himself. However, the sensitive Jade Lake's fairy, how could she not have heard? The hands she concealed in her sleeves tightened some more. Then her face burst open into a quiet and content smiling expression. With a reproachful expression, she annoyedly took a quick glance at Lan Xian. "What are you doing? Saying this kind of stuff in front of Miss Su? It's not as if she is a person from our circle. If she knows too much, on the contrary, it would not be good for her." She turned and smilingly looked at Su Luo. "Miss Su, I speak pretty bluntly. You will not take offense, right?" The Jade Lake's fairy wouldn't feel at ease if she didn't suppress Su Luo every moment. Su Luo raised an eyebrow and smiled, declining to comment. The Jade Lake's fairy smilingly looked at Nangong Luyan, shaking his sleeves and pouting playfully said, "Third senior brother, weren't you just chatting very easily with Miss Su? Why is it that now you are ignoring her?" "Third senior brother is really too much. I just arrived here. And at once, you snubbed Miss Su. How would others see me as?" 1. I'm just going to do a direct translation of Bai Qinying's nickname here. The ing in Bai Qinying is part of the word shadow in English. Adding the give you the complete English word shadow. So I'm just going to translate it as little shadow, rather than little Ingzi. Chapter 372 Jade Lake's Fairy 4. Without waiting for Nangong Luyan to speak, she again smilingly said to Su Luo, "Miss Su, Nangong is just like this, didn't take care of you satisfactorily before, so please don't mind it." She had the posture of a main female hostess. Su Luo indifferently cast Nangong Luyan a glance, the corner of her mouth rising into a ridiculing arc. It was not that long ago that this man was determined to hold her hand and lead her walking by in front of everyone while strutting around. He had an appearance of cupping a treasure in the center of his palm. Right now she seemed to be superfluous. No, not seeming. Rather, of course she was superfluous. Could it be she was merely there to fill in the loneliness, emptiness and coldness when the Jade Lakes fairy was not around? Su Luo had this ridiculing expression as she looked at Nangong Luoyan. But this stingy guy didn't even bother to give her a glance, and directly acted as if she didn't exist. Mena truly mercurial. Su Luo's heart was sour, and slanted her head away to look at the landscape outside. Bei Qining was always aware of Li Yaoyao's gentle, soft and tender appearance on the surface, while her heart was incomparably strong. He saw Su Luo's dramatic change, and wanted to say something to rectify this, but was broken off by Su Luo. Su Luo smilingly said, "What taking offense? The Jade Fairy is being overly sensitive." Su Luo conceded to her the position of main female hostess on Nangong Luoyan's yacht. She had numerous words that would put the Jade Lakes Fairy on the spot. However, was it worth it? This man's heart, from beginning to end, only had the Jade Lakes Fairy. Not a single moment would he not protect her. Again, for what reason should she vie for him with the Jade Lakes Fairy? What was there that was worth fighting over? Could she even manage to win it over? Even if she was able to win it over, what was the use? However, Su Luo had not anticipated that Nangong Luoyan's face would, in an instant, condense into frost. His pair of beautiful eyes was like a millennium-old glacier, revealing sharp, ice-cold rays of light, giving off a trace of cold intent. The Jade Lakes Fairy didn't seem to be aware of it and smilingly said to Su Luo, "That's right. Is Miss Su also here to hook some amethyst thorn fishes?" "Came to see the world," Su Luo stingily and lightly replied. The Jade Lakes Fairy saw Su Luo's lonely expression, and smiling in a consoling manner said, "Miss Su, you need not be so broken-hearted. Amethyst thorn fishes are usually hard to catch, even more so with your foundations. Therefore, not catching one is reasonable. When I was 5 years old, it was my first time coming, and back then I also didn't catch a single fish. Therefore, you really needn't be so heartbroken." Once these words were said, the expressions of everyone present were even stranger than before. The Jade Lakes Fairy was immersed in the joy of Su Luo automatically withdrawing, and the blow she dealt her, that she became so careless as to not sense the peculiarity in people's expressions. Her smile was as splendid and dazzling as 100 flowers. But a mocking expression flashed through Su Luo's eyes. The Jade Lakes Fairy's heart was thrown into disorder. The person who had the so-called concerned mind was now thrown into upheaval. Such a noble, virtuous and aloof little princess from the Jade Lake Palace, because of Nangong Luoyan, let go of her womanly appearance to personally go into battle, and ended up humiliating herself. It also could be considered too tough on her. What meanings her words had, everybody was well aware of. Unfortunately, her news lagged behind too much. And she still wasn't aware that Su Luo was now a third rank, and not a good-for-nothing waste anymore. She held the 5-year-old her in comparison to Su Luo. She really thought too highly of herself. Su Luo's eyes that could distinguish black from white was like water, so clear you could see to the bottom. Her gaze met those of the Jade Lakes Fairies, and the corner of Su Luo's eyes poked up as the corner of her mouth hooked up slightly, indifferently saying, "The Jade Lakes Fairy, you mustn't console me. Why is it that I feel more heartbroken the more you try to console me?" The Jade Lakes Fairy, this giving oneself airs of consoling. If the essence of her heart fell short just a little, then wasn't it that the more you listen to her, the more deeply hurt you feel? But Su Luo's truthful sentence was like poking at a bee's nest. One could only see the Jade Lakes Fairy's expression freezing. Momentarily, a layer of shallow fog appeared in that pair of huge, clear eyes. She gave off an appearance of having her heart seriously wounded. Chapter 373, Jade Lakes Fairy 5. With an expression of self-blame and feeling guilty until she almost cried, she said, "Miss Su, are you in the midst of blaming me? But I am truly concerned about you. How could you say such things about me?" Su Luo also didn't expect that the kind of noble, virtuous and icily arrogant Jade Lakes Fairy she had first met back then would in a split second change into a lovely, pitiful, delicate white lotus flower. She couldn't help but give her a thumbs up in her heart. She really could act, Her performance was truly great. Look at that lovely, pitiful little appearance. It was a much better act when compared to Lan Xian and their performance earlier. If Lan Xian and them had this kind of acting skills, not to say 100 amethyst thorn fishes, even 1,000 fishes, she would present it to them without blinking an eye. The Jade Lake's fairy was still not finished. Her slender fair hand tugged at Nangong Lian's sleeves with an appealing for fairness and justice manner. Third senior brother, you say, just a moment ago, what I said. Isn't it truly because I was concerned about Miss Su? I really didn't expect that her inner heart would be this weak. I really didn't do it on purpose. Nangong Lian merely looked at her with an indifferent smile and didn't speak a word. Third senior brother, why don't you say something? Only you can get back justice for me. Delicate as a white lotus flower, that pair of beautiful eyes was misty with tears. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, everyone would believe that she had suffered endless times of being wronged. Su Luo raised an eyebrow. With a ghost of a smile, she cast a sidelong glance at Nangong Lian. She really wanted to see what kind of justice Nangong Lian would deal out. Yet, Nangong Lian still hadn't stepped forth to declare his position before another man that had stood by the Jade Lake's fairy's side since the beginning, stepped out. He glared threateningly at Su Luo with an imposing manner. The double-edged sword in his hand suddenly thrust out. Dare to be disrespectful to Yao Yao courting death. Li Outyan's voice was proud and coldly detached. His long sword was even more sinister and bone-chilling. It showed no quarter as it thrust towards Su Luo's throat. Nobody would have anticipated that Li Outyan actually said he would take action, and immediately did just that. Moreover, he went straight for a killing maneuver. Also, what kind of person was Li Outyan? He was Jade Lake Palace's younger generation's number 2 master expert. Now, he was already at the 6th rank, merely one short rank below Nangong Lian, and nothing more. The ice-cold long sword thrust toward Su Luo's throat. Relentlessly, Su Luo's eyes were as serene as water. Nangong Lian, will you look on unfeelingly as I fall in a pool of blood? The corner of Su Luo's mouth lifted into a fireworks kind of desolate smile. Just when the long sword was at a distance about a hand's width from Su Luo's throat, all of a sudden, a fine white finger with distinct joints abruptly appeared and lightly flicked that long sword. Immediately, that imposing and threatening longsword unexpectedly twisted to the side, cleanly brushing past Su Luo's slim neck. Nangong Lian. Li Outyan, utterly discomfited, glared at Nangong. He didn't expect that Nangong Lian would take action at the very last second. Hadn't Yao Yao already pulled to stop him? Wasn't he already intimate with Yao Rao to the point that nothing could come between them? Nangong Lian slowly stood up, his sideways glance meeting up with the Jade Lake's fairy's gaze. The corner of his mouth was hooked into an extremely weird smile. He reached out his hands to brush his sleeves. He easily flicked away the Jade Lake's fairy's hand that was wrapped around his arm, with not the least bit of tenderness, directly and efficiently. The Jade Lake's fairy looked in astonishment at her comforting hand that was just removed. In a daze, she stared fixedly at Nangong Lian. Third senior brother. Nangong Lian unhurriedly walked to Su Luo's side and stood side by side with her. He smiled a smile that was yet not one at the Jade Lake's fairy. He then raised an eyebrow and smilingly said, but his tone was deeply cold, "It's good that you still remember I am your third senior brother." Third senior brother? The Jade Lake's fairy took a step forward, wretchedly looking at this figure that led her soul around in a dreamlike state. Remember it. I will forever be your third senior brother, but it is only this single identity to you. Nangong Lian held Su Luo's hand and pulled it up. Chapter 374, Jade Lake's Fairy 6. Su Luo wanted to withdraw her hand, but he only gripped hers even more tightly, no matter how much strength she used. In front of him, it was like an ant trying to shake a tree, simply unable to move him in the slightest. Nangong Lian's eyes, without the least bit of pity, met with the Jade Lake's fairy's pair of wretched eyes. Under his fluid gaze that seemed tranquil, though it hit a hawk-like sharp cutting edge, he firmly declared, "Look closely at her. She is Princess Jean. Apart from her, there will never be another." Boom! The Jade Lake's fairy only felt her own head exploding, the blood flowing backwards, and waves of dizziness burst from her forehead. Just a moment ago, they were still good. Why was it that in a split second, the situation took such a dramatic turn? In the end, where did the problem come from? The Jade Lake's fairy's eyes were hazy from tears, lovely and pitiful. Third senior brother, how could you be like this? Li Outyan supported the Jade Lake's fairy, who was on the verge of collapse, his expression extremely ugly. His cold and detached gaze swept towards Nangong Luyan. Nangong Luyan, do you still remember your promise to the Jade Lake Palace? Never will I forget it. Nangong Luyan's gaze was sharp and abstruse. His thin scarlet-red lips hooked up apathetically. Since you haven't forgotten, then how dare you treat Yao Rao in this way? Li Outyan, with unbearable anger, loudly hollered. Do you know how great was the price Yao Yao paid for you? How can you be this ungrateful, as to kick the teeth of your benefactor? Has your conscience been eaten by a dog? Nangong Luyan's rich black eyes were like the quiet sea under white clouds, tranquil and obscure. He unhurriedly and languidly spoke one sentence. Don't tell me. You think this king ought to give his heart to repay a kindness? Li Outyan was immediately choked off, demanding the arrogant Nangong Luyan to use this way to repay a kindness. You might as well just kill him off straightforwardly. Nangong Luyan indifferently glanced once at the Jade Lake's fairy. Yao Yao, if from now on you will be obedient, then you still will be my, Nangong Luyan's little sister. If on the other hand, what was the meaning of if on the other hand? Everyone was crystal clear about it. Third senior brother, don't want. 2 rows of pure tears tumbled from the Jade Lake's fairy's beautiful eyes. She movingly and sadly gazed fixedly at Nangong Luyan. His rejection was just that direct and efficient, simply not giving her any leeway to delude herself. She didn't want it. She had set her mind on him since childhood. All these years, she had continually waited for him to come to marry her. But then one day, he actually informed her that the person he wanted to marry was not her. She could not accept this, was determined not to accept it. Why? Why? Just a moment ago we were still good. And suddenly, it all changed into the circumstances right now. Is it because of second older brother? I can apologize for it. Miss Su, I send my apologies to you. My second older brother was unintentional. He was too furious, thus ended up like this. Will you please forgive us, okay? Such an arrogant and proud Jade Lake's fairy had now thrown her self-respect to the ground for Nangong Luyan to trample on. She even admitted to an error and apologized towards Su Luo. Su Luo was messed up until she was at a loss because of the drastic change. Nangong Luyan, this shitty guy, just a moment ago, it still seemed as if he and the Jade Lake's fairy was in a close relationship where others couldn't step in between them. Now, he had changed into the appearance of clearly setting down the boundary with her. He was really indeed too changeable and fickle, with indeterminate moods that went from overcast to clear. Nangong Luyan watched the Jade Lake's fairy and gave a sigh. Yao Yao, do you really want to know? Even if this answer may injure you? Nangong Luyan's pair of eyes still had that indifferent smile. The corner of his mouth was still hooked into that nefarious, flattering arc. He had a calm and composed expression. His body gave off a completely staying out of it manner. The Jade Lake's fairy's body trembled from head to toe as she thought about it. Finally, she still quietly nodded her head. Yes, even if I die. Li Yao Yao, if I were to die, I want to die with clarity. Nangong Luyan was never a master that had tender, protective feelings for the fairer sex. One only saw him slowly start to talk, making people respect him, and feel that he was too high to reach. Chapter 375, Jade Lake's Fairy 7. Nangong Luyan slowly started to talk. Very simple, in fact, I just wanted to probe if my family's Su Luo, this little treasure, would be jealous or not, and that's all. The result is all thanks to your very brilliantly acted friendly feelings. It was also very useful. The Jade Lake's fairy was trembling from head to toe, simply tottering on the verge of collapse. No matter how much she thought, she couldn't understand just now that Nangong Luyan's conduct was actually done to deceive her. He was putting on a play for Su Luo, that slut, to watch, because he just wanted to provoke her to see if she would be jealous or not. How could it be like this a few months earlier? He was still treating her intimately close. She was the only girl that could get close to him. The only one. Could third senior brother just change this fast? No, it's not. Everything was all because of Su Luo. This little slut. If it was not for her, she also wouldn't have landed in this kind of deplorable situation. Even more, third senior brother also wouldn't treat her like this. The Jade Lake Fairy's eyes were like spitting out venom, ferociously shooting towards Su Luo. That pair of eyes seemed to want to shoot a huge hole through Su Luo. At this moment, she really wanted to rush up and simply choke the living Su Luo to death. This little slut's fate was really good. At that time, she had dispatched so many people to chase her down and kill her. But she still managed to escape. However, in the future, it would be very difficult to say. She, the Jade Lake's fairy, vowed to dismember her body into 10,000 pieces, to resolve the hatred in her heart. Third senior brother, just for this kind of woman, you will discard so many years of our feelings? The Jade Lake's fairy spitefully pointed at Su Luo. Her eyes were full of bitter anguish. You obviously know that she had been discarded by the crown prince before. When did you start to pick up the worn-out shoes one? That even the crown prince doesn't want. Smack! A heavy slap was ruthlessly swung onto the Jade Lake Fairy's face. Nangong Liuyun's pair of eyes seemed to contain icy snow that wouldn't melt in a millennium. His gaze was unwelcoming, cold and unsympathetic, stressing each syllable as he said, "Do you believe that this king will tear your mouth apart?" Nobody knew that Nangong Liuyun would suddenly flip out. Usually, he treated Li Yaoyao well, and had always looked upon her like a real blood-related younger sister. Li Yaoyao only needed that one last step to walk into his heart. The relationship between them originally was very close, that nobody could compare to it. The Jade Lake's princess covered her red and swollen cheek with an inconceivable expression as she stared at Nangong Liuyun. Her body was tottering, muttering to herself, "You hit me. You actually dared to hit me." They had known each other for more than 10 years. He had gotten furious at a countless number of people and acted violently against them. However, he had always used a soft voice to talk to her. Now, unexpectedly, because of a person he had known for less than a few months, moreover, a good-for-nothing waste of a lowly woman, he hit her. How could the arrogant and self-important Jade Lake's fairy accept this? At this moment, she had nearly gone insane from the pressure she placed on herself. Li Yaoyao simply could not watch any more of this. The Jade Lake Palace's most favored little princess, the treasure that all the elders cupped in the center of their palm, would suffer this kind of bullying and humiliation here. How could he accept it? Yaoyao, forget it. Not wanting you is his loss, let us go. This slap, he will remember it. Li Yaoyan's pair of ice-cold, viper-like eyes swept Su Luo a glance. This woman, regardless of whether it was intentional or accidental, her existence obstructed Yaoyao and Nangong's camaraderie. Her existence created a creak in Nangong families and Li family's cooperation. In his role as Li family's child from a direct descendant, he absolutely would not allow this kind of thing to happen. Therefore, this woman must be killed. Second older brother. The Jade Lake's fairy was absolutely irreconcilable. She didn't want to leave with her tail between her legs in the stance of a loser. Still not going, staying here to make an exhibit of yourself. Li Yaoyan rarely shouted loudly and furiously at Li Yaoyao. One worn-out shoes, in this case, could also be translated as loose woman, meaning she had already slept with the crown prince. I like Su Luo, so I used the literal translation here. Chapter 376, Jade Lake's Fairy 8. This younger sister had always been clever and quick-witted. Her innate gift was even more outstanding. Her only failing was her excessive infatuation towards Nangong. Originally, it was a good thing, and the two families' elders all looked favorably on this. However, if Nangong had no such intentions towards her, then this would become a huge weakness. But the Jade Lake's fairy was still hesitant. She didn't want to leave like this, because leaving like this would mean that the crack between her and Nangong would be hard to mend. She firmly believes that third senior brother's pair of eyes was deceived by that witch. If given time, their relationship would still return to how beautiful it was initially. Li Outyin merely pulled on the Jade Lake Fairy's hand, dragging her to walk out with large strides. He loudly bellowed. Such a respectable, luxurious yacht. We cannot afford to take. Even more, we don't need to take. Still not walking away quickly. The Jade Lake's ferry was ultimately pulled away by Li Outyin. Li Outyin carried the Jade Lake's ferry and jumped onto the skiff, gradually sailing into the distance. A split second of quiet appeared on the luxurious yacht. The occasion seemed a little awkward. Nangong Luoyan extended his bony finger and flicked Su Luo's forehead with a sound like the bursting of a chestnut. His smiling expression was devilishly charming and flirtatious. Foolish girl, just a moment ago, you were so heartbroken that you were almost sniveling, right? You still dare to say your heart doesn't have this king? Su Luo was still immersed in this great play with jubilation and deep grief. Now, with one flick from Nangong Luoyan, she rebounded back to reality. She gave a snorting sound and used all her strength to shake off Nangong Luoyan's hand, turning her face away. What nonsense are you saying? Who is about to snivel? Who do you think you are? Oh, still dare to be hard-mouthed. Just a moment ago, who is it that had a weepy, wanting to sob little expression? Just like a wife being abandoned by her husband. Nangong Luoyan laughingly tapped the tip of her lovely and charming nose, not very happily giving two humph. Anyway, this girl, is also too much. An outside woman had already come and bullied you over your head, but you still silently endured it, allowing other people to bully. Look at you normally. You often actually bare your fangs and bandish your claws, but at the crucial moment you faded. Su Luo slanted him a glance. Outside woman? How did she get here? Isn't she still drawn in by a certain someone who doesn't take responsibility? The cagey, rugged face of Nangong Luoyan clearly had a self-satisfied and proud smile. Yes, that was an outsider. Only this King's Luo girl is an inside person. Don't feel like dealing with you. Su Luo turned her head away to look at the scenery, but her mood mysteriously and unfathomably became better. Not to mention the Jade Lake's ferry. She was also messed with and caught unprepared by this maneuver of Nangong Luoyan's. Now, she could calm down her heart and carefully recall all the details. A moment ago, when the Jade Lake's ferry was strutting around in front of her, her heart was indeed somewhat sour and bitter. Could it be she actually really started to like Nangong Luoyan, this bastard? Su Luo took a furtive look aimed at Nangong Luoyan and saw that he seemed to have sensed it. His gaze just so happened to meet the look she cast at him. Su Luo's thoughts became somewhat frantic and hurriedly evaded his gaze. Her heart started to beat irregularly, and her pulse sped up. Now she had a small taste of what that sentence Nangong Luoyan just said. He said he had allowed the Jade Lake's ferry to accompany him to perform a play, to make her see and clearly understand the desires in the depths of her heart. Just when the little person in Su Luo's heart was entangled in an endless dispute, Nangong Luoyan only calmly and smilingly watched her. His eyes shone with a burning, glorious radiance. Only now did Beichening hammer Nangong Luoyan in the chest, laughing while saying, "This bastard indeed. You handling matters still exceeds all expectations." This play was also acted very well. If it was not for knowing the inside story, very likely, even I would have been deceived by you. I really thought you and that girl from the Li family had continuous affection for each other. Beichen Palace and the Jade Lake Palace normally had a complicated relationship. Don't just look at Beichen Ying's in front of others saying, Yao Yao younger sister, this Yao Yao younger sister that. If talking about relationships, their interaction was not as close as he and Su Luo's. Chapter 377, Jade Lake's Ferry 9. Lan Xian smilingly nodded his head. Hey, just now, sister-in-law's brows wrinkled together 7 times, coldly smiled 5 times, clenched her fist tightly 3 times. Second older brother should give some benefits, right? Nangong Luoyan took out a piece of crystal stone from his chest pocket and tossed it to Lan Xian. The corner of his mouth hooked into a shallow smile. His blood-red lips were blood-colored. You did well. Lan Xian smilingly happily caught that piece of cyan-colored crystal stone and tossed his head slightly and smugly towards Beichening. Beichening threw himself at Lan Xian, and the two childish fools immediately got tied up fighting into a ball. When Su Luo heard their dialogue, she couldn't help but be furious. Okay, good. So originally these people all knew the truth, and she was the only one kept in the dark. It caused her inner heart to be tangled up for quite a while. Su Luo furiously glared at Nangong Luyan once. Who would have thought that this bastard would still innocently raise both hands with palms up? This cannot be blamed on this king. Before this king had already told you countless times, the position of Princess Jean, only you one person can sit in it. Who told you to always disbelieve it? Su Luo couldn't help but scowl. You make it seem like I really value that position of Princess Jean. Whoever you like to give it to, then give it to them. Bai Qinying and Lan Xian suddenly smiled, and made fists towards Nangong Luyan, as a way of encouragement. Second brother, the revolution is still unsuccessful. Looks like you still need to try harder. Nangong Luyan indulgently rubbed Su Luo's little head with a somewhat weeping smile. This girl was still so hard to wait upon. He had already did it to this degree, yet she was still dissatisfied? In fact, he and Li Yaoyao had grown up together since they were little. As a man, he was not a vegetable. To say he didn't have even a little feeling for her. How could it be possible? It was only because she and Luo girl could not coexist at the same time. So he had no choice but to make a selection. Only from now on, Nangong Luyan's gaze was indecipherable, floating towards the remote and distant sea surface. From now on, Su girl's safety, he would have to spend more thought on. While they were talking and laughing, the yacht had already sailed close to the Amethyst Fish Palace. If you lifted your eyes to look, you could clearly see an amethyst-thorned fish-shaped palace floating on top of the ocean. The closer they got, the more they were able to discover that this amethyst fish palace was simply huge beyond imagination. Su Luo had a hard time estimating the extent of its size. Just at this time, all of a sudden from the side, a yacht madly rushed forth at high speed and passed Nangong Luyan's extravagant and luxurious yacht. It sailed forward at the front with flying speed. So obscure. Lan Xian came straight out with the cliché. That is the Crown Prince's yacht. Bai Qinying gave a cold snort. Could it be Liao Yan? An Yeming half muttered to himself, and opened his mouth to state this. It certainly must be Liao Yan. Li family is usually well known for this wind system magic. In terms of speed, they always were number one. Capable of surpassing our yacht. Only he can do it. Lan Xian coldly added. Didn't expect that Liao Yan would be so interesting. Originally, they still believed that the Li family would abandon the treasures in the Amethyst Fish Palace and go home. Who would have known that with the turn of their head, they had joined the Crown Prince's side? An Yeming cast an unnerving glance at Nangong Luyan, raised an eyebrow and smilingly said, Don't tell me you don't care a little about Jade Lake Palace turning their head to assist the Crown Prince? Nangong Luyan's gaze was clear and cold. You think he can help the Crown Prince stand up? An indifferent short sentence was infused with Nangong Luyan's inexhaustible self-confidence. Bai Qinying laughed while nodding his head. That's right. Not even giving a thought to what Nangong Liujua's conduct is like. The Li family is usually noble and aloof from politics. It will be strange if they considered him. Su Luo merely silently retreated to the side. In fact, there was one sentence that the Jade Lakes fairy had said that was correct. If she hadn't appeared, then Nangong Luyan and the Li family's relationship would not become this tense. Nangong Luyan, with one pull, stopped Su Luo, and in passing, enfolded her into his embrace. With a gorgeous, alluring smile, he said, Little girl, why are you running? Who is running? I merely thought to get some fresh air, okay? Even at the risk of her life, Su Luo refused to admit the truth. Chapter 378, Jade Lake's Fairy 10. Nangong Luyan watched her with his pupils, which were like a lake, deep and pitch black. As intelligent as he was, how could he not know what Su Luo was thinking in her heart? Don't put all the blame on your own body. This conflict had always existed. For every day I don't marry Li Yaoyao, my and the Li family's relationship would not be harmonious for another day. Nangong Luyan smilingly said. Actually, the thing he didn't finish saying was that the reason why the Jade Lakes Li family settled on him was because their motive was not that simple. However, speaking of the Crown Prince's side on his luxurious yacht, the Crown Prince's mood right now was hard to describe in words. Just using the old idiom extreme sorrow turns to joy was sufficient to summarize everything. Originally, he lost everything to Su Luo, a debt he owed that couldn't be paid off in this lifetime. However, he never expected that in the middle of the ocean would unexpectedly emerge the amethyst fish palace that was rarely encountered every 100 years. This was fine, but he also didn't expect to still come across people from the Jade Lakesley family. Li Yaoyan, a grand and stately character at the peak of 6th rank. Li Yaoqi, known as the Jade Lakes Fairy, Eastern Ling country's #1 beauty, talented and good-looking. At such a young age, her innate gift in martial arts had already reached the 5th rank. Her future prospects absolutely would be unlimited and could not be measured. But these two individuals actually boarded his yacht. In addition, they also promised to give him a helping hand after entering the Amethyst Fish Palace. "Aren't you guys partners of Nangong Luyan? Why did you come to help me?" The Crown Prince had some misgivings. He really didn't understand this. Once Li Yaoyan heard Nangong Luyan, these 4 words immediately, his complexion became ashen, with both hands clenched tightly into fists. He was obviously furious to the extreme. The Jade Lake Fairy's pair of red, swollen eyes were filled with glistening teardrops. Seeing it made one pity her, and made people who saw this heartbroken. More than half of the Crown Prince's soul was stolen away. His heart felt extreme tenderness and pity towards the Jade Lake's Fairy. But in the Jade Lake Fairy's eyes flashed vicious rays of light. Stressing every syllable, she said, "Nangong Liujiwe, do you want to ascend the throne to become emperor?" The Crown Prince was immediately scared that he jumped up. This kind of unfilial, rebellious words, when the Jade Lake's Fairy said it, it seemed really smooth, completely lacking any apprehension. Without the slightest hesitation, he ordered the servants to retire. Then the Crown Prince covertly asked, "What did you say?" "Nangong Liujiwe, if you want to become emperor, our Jade Lakesley family could help you. But you must promise me one thing." The Jade Lake Fairy's eyes were like a viper, giving off a sinister radiance. Coming into contact with the Jade Lake Fairy's gaze, the Crown Prince's heart suddenly jumped from fright. How was it that the charming and gentle illusion, in a split second, vanished so completely? This was a powerful, domineering woman. Her inner heart was definitely not as weak as her outer appearance. The Crown Prince firmly said, "You say it. Go chase back Su Luo, that little slut." The Jade Lake Fairy's voice was dark and cold as she said, "When you have stolen her back from within Nangong Liuyan's hands, that's when our Jade Lakesley family will take action to assist you." The Crown Prince was also not a fool. All at once, he understood the critical point of this matter. He said it all along. Li Yaoyan and the Jade Lake's Fairy seemed fine. Why didn't they go to Nangong Liuyan's yacht, but rather come aboard on his yacht? So, it turned out to be because of Su Luo. Looked like this loathsome girl was not forever going to be more of a hindrance than help to him. Able to see Nangong Luyan and Li family, who he need to be wary of, have a falling out. The happiest about this was none other than the Crown Prince. However, the issue put forth by the Jade Lake's Fairy, this matter, would make things difficult for him. Su Luo, that loathsome girl, is in Nangong Liuyan's hand. You also saw how he treasures that loathsome girl. Wanting to steal her back, very difficult. The Crown Prince shook his head. Originally, he also thought that Nangong Luyan would marry the Jade Lake Palace's, this little princess. However, he didn't expect from the side, thrust out Su Luo, who unexpectedly stole away all of Nangong Liuyan's soul. Chapter 379, Amethyst Fish Palace, 1. In the wake of that girl constantly demonstrating her extraordinary talent, the Crown Prince also had to admit that before, his vision was not good, letting go of such a hen that could lay golden eggs. Recalling that he owed her 1,500 pieces of green-colored crystal stones, immediately, the Crown Prince's face sank to the point that water could drip out. The Jade Lake's Fairy frowned. With some displeasure, she snorted out, "Isn't she just a good-for-nothing waste? Why are you still hesitant?" "A good-for-nothing waste?" The Crown Prince suddenly looked at the Jade Lake's fairy with a speechless expression. That girl's reputation was not good. The label of a good-for-nothing waste was stuck to her body for more than 10 years. Also, because of this, in order to get rid of this burden, he had employed a stratagem to break off the engagement. But was the truth really like this? She could treat Su Qing, who was praised as the new generation's gifted genius, as a rival, then setting up a life-and-death duel with her. She could hook so many amethyst thorn fishes under thousands of pairs of staring eyes, and strike him until he was too ashamed to show his face. This kind of her was still that good-for-nothing from that time? Basically, this was completely a different person, all right? The Crown Prince slowly shook his head, stressing each word, saying, Jade Lake's fairy, I'm afraid your information is somewhat behind. Could it be you don't know that now, Su Luo is already at the 3rd rank in strength? In her age group, having this kind of cultivation, even if it was not regarded as a genius, it was still considered outstanding. Sure enough, the Jade Lake's fairy frowned, saying in displeasure, What? She actually is a 3rd rank. No wonder. No wonder that the several maids she sent, each and every one of them never came back. In all likelihood, they were all killed by her. So it turned out that Su Luo, for so many years past, was concealing her strength and biding her time. In front of people, she was considered a good-for-nothing. No wonder she was able to seduce 3rd senior brother until he was infatuated, head over heels in love. She was really a character. However, merely a 3rd rank. Also merely a 3rd rank and nothing more. Not only that, but the Crown Prince let out a faint sigh. Jade Lake's fairy, there is something you are not aware of. Don't know what secret is on this loathsome girl's body today. Her talents shined and seized everyone's eyes. What do you mean? The Jade Lake's fairy frowned. As expected, the Jade Lake's fairy does not know. Alas, do you know who hooked the most amethyst thorn fishes today? The Crown Prince's expression was somewhat despondent. This was the deepest pain in his heart. Don't tell me it wasn't 3rd senior brother? The Jade Lake's fairy asked, somewhat astonished. In previous years, the one who hooked the most fish was undeniably 3rd senior brother. There was simply no need for doubt. Not him. The Crown Prince replied simply. Then who? A person you will never guess, no matter how many tries. The Crown Prince's expression was very complicated. Don't tell me, that person is Su Luo? The Jade Lake's fairy uttered in surprise. Afterwards, her mouth hooked into a sneer, and felt that her own notion was simply too absurd. How could it be her? Even if her cultivation now was at the 3rd rank, among this group of people, that was at the very bottom. How could she even hook one fish? Even if she could hook 1 or 2 fishes, then her luck was already considered pretty good. But the Crown Prince's words thoroughly smashed her daydream. You guessed right today, the person that hooked the most amethyst thorn fish is not a stranger, but is precisely that loathsome girl. Whenever the Crown Prince spoke of this, he would fume with rage between gritted teeth. He wished that time would flow backwards, returning him to before he made the bet with her. If it was only this loathsome girl betting with him, then forget it. As it happened, Beichen and those people also all took part in it, making him unable to breach the contract like he wanted to. What did you say? The Jade Lake's fairy, who originally sat on the chair made out of red sandalwood, stood up in a flash. Her pair of eyes were brimming with a burning radiance. She grabbed the Crown Prince's collar, looking malevolent and vengeful. I order you to say it again. Chapter 380, Amethyst Fish Palace 2. The Crown Prince's entire body was almost lifted up by the Jade Lake's fairy. Faced with that pair of very severe and sinister eyes, the Crown Prince only felt his heart immediately become cold. Undoubtedly, she was as beautiful as a fairy, but why did she give him the feeling of having cold sweat on his back? No matter how much the Crown Prince thought about it, he couldn't understand. Quickly tell me, how could the Jade Lake's fairy now still be that pure cold, aloof and proud as if above the common people, that woman? Her right now was a malicious, sinister witch of a woman. The Crown Prince restrained the chill in his heart, gave a cold snort and deliberately tried to shock the Jade Lake's fairy. What's the harm in letting you know? Today's fishing champion is precisely that loathsome girl. Don't believe me, you can go and ask around. It was under thousands of pairs of staring eyes. Who could tell a lie? That is impossible. Only if third senior brother gave some of the ones he hooked to her. How could the Jade Lakes fairy believe it? Humph. This king also wishes this is not true. But under thousands of pairs of staring eyes, all present saw this clearly. That loathsome girl simply and neatly caught 1,500 amethyst thorn fish. The crown prince shook off Jade Lake Fairy's hand, and said it while panting with rage. This matter. He originally didn't want to mention it again, however. It was to no avail since the Jade Lakes Fairy kept asking. 1,500 amethyst thorn fishes? Are you certain it isn't the common kind of fish? At this moment, it was not only the Jade Lakes Fairy. Even Li Outyin was surprised. His pair of eyes was like electricity, staring fixedly at the crown prince. The Jade Lakes Fairy had an even more stunned expression as she stared at the crown prince. It was as if she was looking for signs that he was lying on his face. But the crown prince starkly spread out both of his hands. If you guys don't believe me, go out and randomly grab anyone to ask, and everything will be clear. In any case, the matter today, everyone saw it clearly. Not waiting for the Jade Lakes Fairy to act, Li Outyin had already flown out, and in a blink of an eye, he came back with a few people he had grabbed. After interrogating them one after another, he was amazed to discover that every sentence the crown prince said was true. Moreover, the most pathetic thing was that this crown prince also actually lost 1,500 green-colored crystal stones to that little slut. The Jade Lakes Fairy was simply dumbfounded. Besides being shocked, in addition to jealousy, she also felt humiliated. Now, recalling that matter that happened a moment ago on that yacht, a scarlet color flashed across her face. Now, she finally understood why just now, on third senior brother's yacht, when she mentioned hooking amethyst thorn fish, those few people's expression would be so surprised. She had really underestimated that little slut. No, not merely underestimating her. She had greatly underestimated her. However, 1,500 amethyst thorn fish. In the end, how had she accomplished it? Could it be that on her body, she had an unknown secret? Even if the Jade Lakes Fairy pondered until her brain became stupid, she would still fail to think that the common Su Luo was actually a space system mage. Moreover, she still had the little divine dragon to remind her to mix some celestial spirit water into the fish food. Time slowly passed. Now, the yacht had already arrived in front of the Amethyst Fish Palace. Li Outyin patted her slender shoulder. His voice was deep and low. Don't let your imagination run wild. Find an opportunity to grab that girl over here and interrogate her. Then we'll know. If I didn't guess wrong, that girl ought to have hidden secrets on her body. Li Outyin never considered if the other party would cooperate with the questions from his interrogation. This was because he had hundreds and thousands of methods that would make the other party obediently tell the truth. A group of people walked quickly out of the yacht on foot. The imposing and vast Amethyst Fish Palace that had no end at a glance now stood before everyone's eyes. Li Outyin stepped off the yacht and directly rushed towards the Amethyst Fish Palace. This was due to the reason that the earlier you entered the Amethyst Fish Palace implied that your chances would be greater. But he was forced to stop his footsteps in front of the palace gates. The doors to the Amethyst Fish Palace did not directly open wide. That glowing vermilion red-colored palace gates was tightly shut. Chapter 381. Amethyst Fish Palace 3. Li Outyin let out a cold humph and stamped his feet after concentrating strength into his soles. He drew the huge, double-edged sword he carried on his back. That sword, like a cold streak, flashed past with a threatening chill. One could only see Li Outyin lifting that huge sword up high and brandishing it towards that solid palace gate and chopping down. A burst of violent force rippled through the air, and it seemed as if the ground was vibrating. However, that seemingly thin palace gate didn't even move an inch. On the gate, not a trace of it having been chopped could be seen. How could it be like this? He was a 6th-rank expert. Oh, this was impossible. Li Outyin did not believe it was possible. Once more, he concentrated all his spirit power and poured it completely into that huge sword. The The tip of the sword shot out an explosive force. One could only hear swoosh, 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 the ear-splitting sounds of the atmosphere being fractured. This single chop was unsurpassingly vigorous and deft. However, when this sword chopped down, the vermilion red-colored panels of the hinged gate seemed to be emitting a faint radiance. It seemed like a skin-like coating was wrapped entirely around its body as a protective layer. Not only was there no trace of any difference to the gate, on the contrary, Li Aoyan's huge swords was heavily ricocheted back. If it weren't for Li Aoyan's speedy reaction and promptly grabbing hold of the handle of that huge sword, then this time, he would have lost a lot of face. This hinged gate was sealed by an expert. Li Aoyan with extreme anger bellowed out loudly. The Crown Prince's expression immediately became somewhat malicious. Their yacht had tightly sailed forward and slowly overtook everyone to be first, just so they could reach the Amethyst Fish Palace, a step ahead of everyone else. It was in order to be the earliest to enter the Amethyst Fish Palace. Countless people from the older generation left behind directions, saying that for the earliest ones to enter, their odds of obtaining treasures would be that much greater. But no one ever said that to enter the Amethyst Fish Palace, you still needed to open the seal on the gate. But now, with this delay, Nangong Liuyan's yacht, in the blink of an eye, had arrived. Bai Qining was the first to jump out of the yacht. Bai Qining took it upon himself to constantly strike at the Crown Prince. Smiling happily, he said to Lan Xian, "Oh, I was under the impression that some had already gone inside the palace earlier. I didn't expect that instead, so many people would enthusiastically stand in front of the gate to wait for us." Lan Xian raised an eyebrow and smilingly said, "Idiot, do you really believe they are standing in formation to welcome us? They are wishing that we could disappear at once for good. Of course, it is because they couldn't enter. If they could go in, they would have already run in until we couldn't even find their shadows." The Crown Prince's complexion was ashen as he slanted a glance at Lan Xian. This despicable fellow again emulated Bai Qining's inclinations. All of his words were very poisonous. The corner of Lan Xian's mouth hooked into a shallow smile, and his chin was tilted up as he slanted a glance at the Crown Prince. That posture exhibited the air of a young master from an influential aristocratic family, and as an elder brother, it was 100% emphatic. Li Aoyan's tries were no good. Adding in the Jade Lake's ferry was also no good. Finally, they added the group of people the Crown Prince brought, and as before it was still no good. The Crown Prince became somewhat anxious. This was owing to the fact that the amount of time the Amethyst Fish Temple stayed was limited. Every 100 years, it would appear once. Every time it appeared, it would stop over for one day. Therefore, every minute and every second was precious. Whenever the Crown Prince thought of that pile upon piles of treasures that he had no chance of obtaining, it was like his heart was crying blood. Ever since Nangong Liuyan appeared, afterwards, the Jade Lake Fairy's gaze would unblinkingly stare at him with beautiful luminous eyes. Since young to adult, she had liked him for so many years. How could she give up just because of one sentence of rejection from Nangong? Even more so because although Li Yaoyao's outward appearance was extremely delicate, her heart was strong and unwaveringly determined, such that many men could not hold a candle to her resoluteness. Seeing Nangong Liuyan so naturally holding Su Luo's hand as he slowly walked over, the Jade Lake's fairy sucked in a deep breath. She calmed down her heart and state of mind, her face blossoming with a light and pure smiling expression. "Third senior brother, since everybody all came because of this Amethyst Fish Palace, why not open this seal together?" Nangong Liuyan originally ignored her, until Su Luo bumped his arm. Only then did he indifferently cast a glance at the Jade Lake's fairy. He non-committally raised an eyebrow. Chapter 382, Amethyst Fish Palace 4. The Jade Lake Fairy's appearance stiffened for a split second, but she still maintained that arc at the corner of her mouth. Her smile was as gorgeous as a flower, as if the unpleasantness on the yacht from before never happened. Could third senior brother still be taking offense at Yaoyao's lack of manners from before? If that is so, then Yaoyao Fairy will apologize to Miss Su. The corner of the Jade Lake Fairy's mouth contained a shallow, indifferent smile, with a composed expression on her face. It seemed as if she was still that extraordinary and refined Jade Lake's fairy. And he was still that third senior brother who pampered and spoiled her. Nangong Luyan gave a smile that was not quite one as he cast her a glance, but he did not speak. Su Luo saw this, and a trace of precaution flitted across her heart. If the Jade Lake's fairy was still pretending to be that lovely, pitiful, delicate white lotus flower from before, then she would be easy to deal with. However, she could calm her mood within such a short amount of time, giving a tranquil and calm appearance without a ripple, as if nothing had happened. It was just like the first time when Su Luo saw her, so extraordinary, refined and above the common people, that Jade Lake's fairy. This kind of forbearance, this kind of shrewdness, really made people afraid of the consequences. Recalling before on the yacht, able to upset her until she exposed her real nature, it could clearly be seen how seriously upsetting those words by Nangong Luyan were to her. However, from now on, if Su Luo wanted to see the appearance of her losing control, then it certainly would be difficult. The crown prince clenched his teeth. He squeezed out a trace of a smile from the corner of his stiff lips, and said to Nangong Luyan, "Second younger brother, looking at the time passing in seconds and minutes, don't tell me you are not anxious? Wouldn't it be better if we all work as one to open the seal together?" Nangong Luyan indifferently cast a glance at the crown prince, lowered his gaze, and in an indulgent and spoiling manner, rubbed Su Luo's hair. "This King's Luo girl has the final say." Immediately, the crown prince's expression hardened. The Jade Lake fairy's expression, for only a split second, was simply extremely ugly. She grinded her teeth before her face perked up into an unperturbed, smiling expression as if nothing happened and said, "Miss Su, behind us there are so many people watching impatiently. You wouldn't let everyone be disappointed, right?" Su Luo glanced back for a look. Sure enough, she saw a large group of densely crowded people. Following the Jade Lake fairy's words, they violently nodded their heads towards her. Their movements were so in sync as if they were one, very much identical, as if she was blocking their path. It was as if she was a heinous great sinner. Su Luo rolled her eyes at Nangong Luyan in disgruntlement. "Who wants me to be the villain in your place? Wishful thinking. I order you to get out of my way." Once these words were out, everyone present immediately sucked in a cold breath of air. This was merely ordinary dialogue in Su Luo's eyes, but looking at everyone's eyes, this was completely not like that. No, they were like all the people in Su Manor on that day. Their hearts were trembling at least 3 times, having been shaken by Su Luo's remarks. His Highness Prince Jean was what kind of savage and bloodthirsty person, able to make him indulge her to this degree, speaking based on reason, that Miss being loved so much ought to burn incense and worship Buddha in thanks, right? However, this Miss she actually still had a scolding tone. Not only that, she also had an unhappy appearance. Who did she think she was? But she was confronting Prince Jean, the temperamental, with his moods indeterminately going from overcast to clear, savage and ruthless, that His Highness Prince Jean. She was simply courting death. Now practically everyone was regretfully looking at Su Luo, because in their eyes, how could His Highness Prince Jean not get angry? Even the Jade Lake's fairy, who had always been familiar with Nangong Luyan, now, that pair of quick-witted, beautiful eyes had a burning radiance, similar to the rainbow-colored sunlight. It was brimming with expectation, hope, happiness, and rejoicing in other people's misfortune kind of expression while looking at Su Luo. In her eyes, Nangong Luyan's temperament had always been bad, and what he hated the most was disobedience and refusal. However, what made everyone be taken aback, and also made the Jade Lake's fairy bite her gums until they tore into pieces, was that the scene that their eyes had expected completely did not take place. On the contrary, Nangong Luyan moved in closer still, more intimately smiling at her, in a fawning manner as if trying to win her favor. Chapter 383, Amethyst Fish Palace 5. Nangong Luyan gave a devilishly charming smile. "How could this king be willing to let you act as a villain? Okay, this king will put forth the effort, and all the credit will be assigned to you." Heavens, God, was this man really His Highness Prince Jean? That legendary, rumored to be bloodthirsty, cruel, and excessively ruthless. A commander who directly cut off the arms of a princess without blinking an eye. That His Highness Prince Jean? This was simply too uncharacteristic of him. Jade Lake's fairy was even more furious, to the point she had bitten her lip until it bled. Her hands were clenched tightly into fists. The veins hidden within the sleeves of her garment had burst out and were bulging, continuously trembling. Under countless gazes, Su Luo knew when to stop. This way is actually pretty good, you should go quickly. Saying this, she directly pushed Nangong Luyan to the front of the wooden hinged gate. Her movement seemed as though she was quite familiar with him. This action again raised endless exclamations of alarmed surprise from everyone. An average person who would dare turn his back to others? Let alone when it comes to an expert, like His Highness Prince Jean? An ordinary person simply couldn't even get close to his back, alright? But not only was Su Luo able to do it, she also did it with extreme familiarity. It was clear to see how much His Highness Prince Jean trusted her. Ignoring all the shocked gazes in her surroundings, Su Luo indifferently stood at the side, watching Nangong Luyan with an expression that was calm and unruffled despite being in the midst of chaos. Bei Qining had both his hands at his waist, sizing up this imposing building, looking at it up and down. He couldn't help but lament. Everyone said the Amethyst Fish Palace was grand and majestic. Today at last, I'm finally able to see it. As expected, it lives up to its reputation. Lan Xian kicked him with his foot. Don't waste unnecessary words, hurry over to help open the seal. Nangong Luyan swept them with a faint glance, and firmly lifted his hands. No need. Could it be that His Highness Prince Jean wanted to open the seal, with only his own strength? This was not possible, right? Just now, when all of those people had gathered together their strength, that gate didn't even move a single jot. Nangong Luyan quietly sized up that gate, carefully observing. His figure seemed to have stood there for a long time, as if since the ancient times. His back was lean and peaceful. His body seemed to have a faint layer of radiance. The surroundings were very quiet. Everyone was stupidly watching His Highness Prince Jean. None of them understood why he was standing there completely motionless. Approximately 1 hour later, the corner of Nangong Luyan's mouth suddenly raised into an evidently smiling expression. He raised the sleeve of his garment carelessly, and directly in front of him, a rapidly rotating circular halo took form. Within this diagram, it seemed to contain inexhaustible spiritual power. Go! Nangong Luyan burst out loudly. That circular halo then gushed forth towards the palace gate in a manner akin to the raging waves in a stormy sea. With a vastly imposing manner, an unstoppable force. Bang! When the circular halo plowed into the palace gate, it issued the sound of a heavy hit. The air sent zing, zing noises. This part of the world seemed to rock violently. The seal is about to be broken. The face of everyone's deathly pale complexions was reflected in the light of the circular halo. The curtain of light enveloping the palace gate that originally obstructed everyone from entering was currently cracking open with a speed visible to the naked eye, gradually turning into nothingness. All the people in the surrounding area had retreated far away, for fear that the powerful waves of spirit power would affect them. However, their facial expressions right now were shocked to the extent of incredulous disbelief. Such a formidable strength, such a fierce wave of spiritual force. In addition, what was even rarer was that His Highness Prince Jin's full use of his spirit power had in the end practically reached the level of perfection. It simply made people admire him to the point of prostrating themselves in adoration. People able to come to the Amethyst Thorned Island could not be ordinary. They had more or less already seen other 7-rank experts, but they simply hadn't seen anyone as formidably powerful as His Highness Prince Jean. Jade Lake's fairy was foolishly gazing at Nangong Luyan with deep love. Her pair of beautiful eyes was glittering with such worship that she nearly became an imbecile. His 7-rank strength was nearly negligible in difference with her father, who was at the 8th rank. If they fought with each other, the outcome was simply too hard to guess. Chapter 384, Amethyst Fish Palace 6. At such an age, possessing this kind of strength, Jade Lake Fairy's eyes narrowed slightly, Both of her fists were clenched. This kind of man. How could she so easily give him up? No, even if she died, she would also never abandon her love for him. She would do everything to obstruct other women. Jade Lake's fairy quietly swept a glance at Su Luo. A trace of ice-cold killing intent flashed through her beautiful eyes. A single loud bang sound could be heard. The seal on the palace gate that the combined power of the Crown Prince's group couldn't even shake a fraction was nevertheless opened solely by Nangong Liuyun's strength. Under this contrast, a conclusion had been drawn about both sides' strength. The Crown Prince's expression was somewhat stiff. Seeing the Amethyst Fish Palace's gates slowly opening, he surreptitiously sent a meaningful glance to Li Aotian. Li Aotian paused a little, then faintly nodded his head. Not waiting for Nangong Liuyun to collect himself, the Crown Prince condensed all his spirit strength into both of his legs. His body was like an out-of-control wild horse, as he abruptly rushed towards the inside of the palace. Li Aotian was also like that, but he still pulled at the Jade Lake's fairy, and in passing, easily let her inside. Bastards, Bei Qining cursed darkly. What kind of people are these? They were unable to open the seal themselves. Fine. They asked Nangong, who opened it, yet they slipped away so quickly like this. Anya Ming swept him a look. Don't just waste words, we should also hurry and enter. If we're late, and that amethyst crystal fish were to be found by them, it would not be so wonderful. Lan Xian promptly nodded. Other treasures we couldn't care less, but we must get our hands on that amethyst crystal fish. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The three people's shadows passed rapidly, flying towards the inside of the palace. However, very quickly they felt something was off. They turned their heads and found that Nangong and Su Luo was actually missing. What's going on? Bei Qining was so worried that he shouted towards the surging tide of people. At this time, the violent surging stream of people were constantly trying to squeeze inside. Each and every one had bloodshot eyes as they charged ahead, fearing that if they were late, the treasures would be taken away by someone. That cruel struggle of risking one's life in a race against time was a scene that was simply indescribable using words. With great difficulty, they waited until the crushing crowd altogether rushed past, and Bei Qining's trio finally saw the couple arriving slowly. Bei Qining was so anxious that smoke was about to come out, and he urgently shouted, "My great His Highness Prince Jean, how could you still be so leisurely calm and collected? Any later and the amethyst crystal fish will be gone." Because of what amethyst crystal fish? Why was everyone fighting to obtain it? It was said that every time the amethyst fish palace appeared, there will be a treasured amethyst fish inside. This treasured amethyst fish did not have any other skills besides spitting out crystal stones. Just like the manner of a silkworm spitting out silk and a hen laying eggs, this amethyst fish could spit out crystal stones. Moreover, it was not only once a day, but it spits out according to the 3 meals timetable, so 3 pieces a day. If you obtain this amethyst crystal fish, then in the future, you wouldn't need to worry about crystal stones. Furthermore, there were no rules to the crystal stones it disgorged. It was said that it depended completely on luck and a person's character. If the character was bursting with greatness, then spitting out a purple crystal stone was also possible. And also, this amethyst fish's lifespan was only 100 years. Until the next time the amethyst fish palace opened, the former amethyst fish would have accomplished its glorious task and retired from use. Since it was like this, the amethyst fish was still the main target that all the influential parties wanted control of. Su Luo could understand Bei Qinying's edginess. However, Nangong Liuyun did not seem to be in the least bit of hurry. He raised an eyebrow slightly with a calm and composed manner, and dismissed Bei Qining with just 4 words. "You guys go first." "What about you?" Bei Qining asked in a loud voice. "Don't tell me that the 3 of you are still no match for those few useless people?" Nangong Liuyun smiled devilishly, raising an eyebrow while watching Bei Qining and them. Chapter 385 Amethyst Fish Palace 7. Bei Qining looked at Su Luo, so furious that he was about to say something, but was glared down by Nangong Liuyun. Finally, Bei Qining merely flung his sleeves in a manner of, since the jar was already broken, might as well throw it. Fine, do as you please. I hope that this time, the amethyst fish will be taken away by Li Yaoyao and company, to infuriate you guys to death. Nangong Luoyan had a smile on his face as he looked at Su Luo, but did not speak. Bai Qinying's group of 3 swept Su Luo one final glance, and glared severely at Nangong Luoyan, with him being angry, having no other alternative appearance. Finally they launched into full speed like a shooting star, and disappeared from in front of them. Su Luo glanced at Nangong Luoyan, frowned and said, "In fact you needn't be like this. I don't need you to keep me company." Even if Bai Qinying and them didn't openly say it, however, Su Luo could also roughly guess at why Nangong Luoyan didn't immediately follow after them to rapidly move forward together. It was because those individuals' speed, she was unable to keep up with. As a result, he would rather miss the chance at a treasure, and still insist on keeping her company by her side as they slowly strolled on. They were as leisurely as if strolling through their own backyard garden. And with regards to that amethyst crystal fish, he basically let things slide. Nangong Luoyan's beautiful eyes were as deep as a pool containing a secretive, shallow smile as he lightly kissed her forehead. "This king hasn't said it. You actually perceived everything, really. It's like your heart is linked to this king's. You tell me, in this lifetime, besides this king, who else can you marry?" Su Luo couldn't help but to hold her forehead and gasp. This guy, no matter what topic, how could he always turn it back into pressing her to marry him? As if he had the intention of only marrying her and no other? Only heard of other men hating to get married, but never heard of a woman hating being asked to be married. Su Luo tried very hard to return the conversation back to the topic again. "Don't tell me you are not worried? That amethyst crystal fish sounds like it would be quite amazing. If you obtain it, in the future, your strength will absolutely rise up a huge step. No matter how good the amethyst fish is, how could it be compared to you?" Nangong Luoyan gestured with his hand, not minding it in the least. His beautiful dark eyes contained a roguish, alluring smiling expression. "You must be very moved by this king's deed. Are you moved to the extent that you will give your heart to me?" Nangong Luoyan's whole body was suffused with a faint luster. One tall and one short, the 2 figures stood just like this. Nangong Luoyan's tall and straight body set off Su Luo to look even more dainty and beautiful. The distance between the two was very close. Su Luo could clearly smell the great smelling, masculine fragrance on his body. That kind of strong and quite pure fragrance was like an intoxicating fog. Su Luo felt that her heart was beating somewhat strongly and unconsciously turned her face away. Nangong Luoyan loved to death her shy little appearance. He didn't lay her bare. That pair of deep, dark, beautiful eyes were smiling, quietly looking at her. Su Luo gave a clear cough, paused a little, and again with great difficulty, tried to carry things back to the proper subject. "You really won't regret it? Later, you are not allowed to say it was because of me that caused you not to get the amethyst fish, then force me to marry you in compensation." Su Luo had no choice but to plan ahead, because this guy really could do this kind of thing. A crafty expression flashed through Nangong Luoyan's eyes, but his face had an appearance of sighing helplessly. "You actually guessed it, how could this be good?" Because of this, Su Luo was angrily tied in a knot. She furiously glared at Nangong Luoyan, but Nangong Luoyan only smilingly pinched her nose. Okay, not going to continue teasing you for fun. But Luo girl, could it be that you still haven't discovered what is your strongest point?" Su Luo thought for a while, but alone, she could not think of an idea. She couldn't help asking suspiciously, "What is it?" Seeing this girl in front of his eyes, with her beautiful, confused, captivating eyes open wide, a soft, spoiling and indulging mood appeared in Nangong Luoyan's heart. He smilingly pulled her along by the hand, walking unhurriedly. He spoke one word while walking: "Luck." Chapter 386, Amethyst Fish Palace 8. What? Su Luo was momentarily unable to react. "Your strongest point is luck. Don't tell me that even now, you still haven't realized it?" Nangong Luoyan smilingly looked at her. "If you don't believe me, you count it yourself. Your luck in the end is so good to the extent of defying the natural order of things." If Nangong Luyan didn't say it, then it was fine, but since he said it this way, the words seemed to resonate a little with Su Luo's heart. Since the beginning when she crossed over after swallowing the dragon's ring, until the innate talent test later. Then again, time after time of fortuitous encounters upon arriving at the Sunset Mountain Range. Even hooking amethyst-thorn fishes from just before was also this way. With all these kinds of coincidences, after she carefully thought about, among these events, her luck really played a huge part. But what about having luck? Luck was also a part of strength. Su Luo's eyes were bright, with a proud of oneself expression. She lifted her chin. Who asked my character to be so good? This kind of thing is something envy could not get you. You just stand at the side and be jealous of me. Nangong Liuyun's beautiful eyes were charming and gentle. He gave a devilishly charming smile. It is indeed something envy won't bring over, however. Isn't that why this king is accompanying you on this stroll? Maybe when this girl is walking, you might even kick upon an amethyst crystal fish on the roadside. Naturally, this was impossible for other people but Su Luo. It was really hard to say with this girl's luck. Su Luo was just about to tease him with a sentence, when all of a sudden, her footsteps stopped. Afterwards, she had a complicated expression as she looked at Nangong Luyan. For a moment, her eyes had a strange look. What happened? Seeing her come to a stop, Nangong Luyan had no choice but to also stop. A white light appeared in Su Luo's hand. A snowy jade-colored, adorable little divine dragon appeared in Su Luo's arms. Not waiting for Su Luo to act, with the speed of flight, he immediately dashed towards the original road they came from. Nangong Luyan suspiciously cast Su Luo a glance. Su Luo gave a hey smile. She really didn't know what would be good to say. She pulled at Nangong Luyan, and with quick steps, followed behind the little divine dragon, while on one hand running to chase after him, and on the other hand, explaining everything to him. This little thing is a special tool dedicated to hunting treasure. Following after him definitely won't be wrong. The little divine dragon had risen naturally, because he found some treasure. Obviously, Nangong Luyan had seen the little divine dragon before, but he didn't know that the little divine dragon could be used to hunt treasure. Now inside the main hall of this palace, it was absolutely empty. Besides Nangong Luyan and Su Luo, the pair of them, everyone else had all without exception, tried to outdo each other and rushed inside. The little divine dragon didn't pause much inside the main hall. His petite clever body was as nimble as a tanuki one, following the passage and hurriedly skimmed along towards the outside. Although Nangong Luyan somewhat didn't believe in this little puppy's ability to seek out treasure, since Su Luo liked it, he would accompany her together in this nonsense. As long as he was by her side, no matter what she does, he would be happy. The little divine dragon's galloping speed lasted for about the period of one stick of incense. When Su Luo and him stood still, Su Luo became somewhat speechless. The place that the little divine dragon stopped at was this place was actually the doorway to the main hall. Just a moment ago, almost everyone was standing here like a dense black mass. Everyone was standing here discussing how to unseal the gate to go inside. Could it be that beneath here, there was really hidden some treasure? If it was really like this, then very likely, everyone who found out would regret it until their intestines were green, right? One could only see the little divine dragon extend his two front paws and continuously dig at the surface of the ground. His little paws were as sharp as a pointed knife. It was sharper compared to most weapons. Nangong Luyan had a strange expression as he looked at the puppy digging at the ground. The corner of his mouth pursed slightly. The surface of this ground, every brick was made from an abnormally hard cold arcane stone. But under the paws of this little guy, it was no different than soil. One paw dug down, a brick was sent flying, and this repeated in a non-stop loop. Suddenly, the light in Nangong Luyan's eyes changed directions. From within the hole that was dug, he felt an intensely strong fluctuations of spirit force. One tanuki, otherwise known as the raccoon dog indigenous to East Asia. Chapter 387, Amethyst Fish Palace 9. Don't tell me there really was a treasure here? Nangong Lian's line of sight gazed towards that black hole. He observed that the black hole was awfully small in diameter and would only allow the little divine dragon to pass. Other people could only extend at most 2 hands in it. One could only see the little divine dragon's body curl up and then leap down. When he reappeared again, his mouth was holding a small, exquisite red sandalwood box. As if taking credit for an achievement, he delivered it to Su Luo. Afterwards, his little tail was pointed up high, and his limpid monochrome clear, big eyes looked at Su Luo. He seemed to have an adorable expression, as if seeking praise. Su Luo rubbed his head and scratched under his chin. Immediately, the little divine dragon was extremely happy. He excitedly thrust himself into Su Luo's embrace, with his little paws holding onto her lapel, unwilling to let go. A woof for quite a while, he hadn't come out to take a breath of fresh air. All along, he had been shut inside by Master to swallow crystal stones and cultivate. Now that he had done a meritorious deed, Master wouldn't continue to shut him in that little darkroom, right? At this moment, Su Luo's entire attention had fallen onto that small box. She wanted to open the box, but discovered that she couldn't open it at all. It was just like that hinged gate, as if it was sealed by someone else. Not only wasn't Su Luo depressed, on the contrary, she was even happier. Things that could be branded with a seal by an expert was absolutely good stuff. It didn't matter that she couldn't open it. She had an expert at her side. A free-of-charge expert she didn't use would be a waste. Naturally, she must use him to the fullest. Su Luo very naturally handed the box over to Nangong Lian. Here, open it to take a look. Don't know what treasure is inside. Nangong Lian, with a complicated expression, cast a glance at that adorable puppy on Su Luo's shoulder. He really didn't expect that such a small puppy was actually a real divine treasure hunting tool. Having such a divine treasure hunting tool, it could be said that in this amethyst fish palace, they possessed a huge advantage. Thinking up to here, Nangong Lian's gaze once again landed on Su Luo's body. This girl's luck. He truly started to suspect whether she was able to step on the amethyst crystal fish while walking. Hurry up and open it so we can have a look. It was rare that Nangong Lian would be absent-minded. Su Luo extended her hand and waved it in front of his face. Yeah, Nangong Lian regained his wits and concentrated his attention on probing the inside of the red sandalwood box. The seal was difficult for Su Luo, however. The same could not necessarily be said with regards to Nangong Lian. One could hear a bang sound echoing, and suddenly, the top part of the box flicked up. In the red sandalwood box quietly laid a small sphere. It was the size of an adult's fist, and entirely jet black in color. According to Su Luo's opinion, this thing somewhat resembled a hand grenade. When Nangong Lian saw this thing, his expression stiffened slightly. Su Luo speculated secretly, able to make even Nangong Lian slightly shocked. In the end, what was this thing? Nangong Lian very warily shut the lid of the red sandalwood box. While doing it, he also drew a seal on top. Perceiving Su Luo's stare, the corner of his mouth arced up into a smile. It's no bother, this seal. A third rank in strength is able to undo it. If it is not sealed, just by you picking it up, it will put you in danger. In the end, what is this thing? Su Luo was very curious. A spirit pinball. Nangong Lian admiringly gazed at Su Luo. In the whole world, who is able to match your luck? It is simply invincible. In the entire world, you couldn't find an rival. How can it be this exaggerated? Su Luo annoyedly said. You should explain this spirit pinball. In the end, what is it and of what use is it? When an expert that is of the 7th rank or higher die, they can condense all of their spirit power into a spirit pinball. Therefore, every spirit pinball has the formidable power of a 7th rank or higher. However, this is a consumable item. Once used, then it is gone. Chapter 388, Amethyst Fish Palace, 10. Nangong Lian handed that red sandalwood box over to Su Luo. However, it is a very good item for saving your life. Put it away properly, don't lightly take it out. Oh, then is the spirit pinball strength great or not? Su Luo very carefully placed the spirit pinball in her space. After that, she asked Nangong Luyan. Nangong Luyan nodded his head. Its might is comparable to a 7th rank expert's entire force in one strike. That is actually possible. 7th rank expert's full strength in one strike? With regards to Su Luo's current 3rd rank, so to speak, a 7th rank expert was already a very formidable existence. This item was still really similar with hand grenades. Wonderfully so, although the method differed, the result was the same. However, a hand grenade wouldn't be able to hurt those experts, but this spirit pinball could. Comparing by strength, this spirit pinball was much stronger. If there are many spirit pinballs, then that would be great. Su Luo somewhat regretfully sighed. Nangong Luyan flicked her forehead with a sound like the bursting of a chestnut. In this world, how could there be so many 7th ranked experts? If it was a 7th ranked expert that fought to the death, even if he could condense out a spirit pinball, then it would also be taken away by the opponent. So why would they condense one? Therefore, spirit pinballs that were handed down throughout time are very few. Even if you have one, it is generally also passed down from generation to generation in large influential families. Able to be passed down are very few. You girls' luck simply defies the natural order of things. Do you know if this spirit pinball was placed on auction, what kind of price it would sell for? Will it be very expensive? Wasn't it merely just a 7th ranked expert's full strength in one hit? Nangong Luyan seriously nodded his head. It simply cannot be estimated with gold coins. Moreover, it is basically impossible to buy it. If you were to use crystal stones, then you would need roughly 50 pieces of green-colored crystal stone. So expensive. Su Luo let out a cry in surprise. Afterwards, she excitedly rubbed the little divine dragon's head. Today, not to speak of what was encountered first, just speaking of the spirit pinball, was enough to earn back the initial cost. Suddenly, Su Luo raised her head and smilingly looked at Nangong Luyan. In other words, now let's say, if I take this spirit pinball to kill Li Outyan, then I am able to kill him, right? Su Luo's senses normally was very sharp. She could clearly perceive the Li family's siblings' killing intent towards her. She knew, Nangong Luyan insisting on slowing down his speed to stay behind and accompany her, was also out of consideration for this part. Nangong Luyan's expression paused slightly. Afterwards, the corner of his mouth hooked into a demonically charming smile, and smiling faintly he said, "Possible, if something unexpected doesn't happen. If I were to go kill the Jade Lakes fairy?" Su Luo smiling happily watched him. Nangong Luyan's thin finger, with the bones clearly outlined, pinched her nose. Able to kill? Then just kill her. Probing this king is useless. Who is probing you? Wishful thinking. Su Luo gave a light humph sound, but her mood seemed pretty good. The two of them spoke while walking, as if idly taking a walk, through the main hall, leisurely and at ease. After about an hour later, indistinct sounds of talking could be heard. As if up ahead, there were lots of people. Those people saw Nangong Luyan and Su Luo walk over in a leisurely manner, as if taking a stroll, in the main hall. Each and every one of them was extremely astonished and also exceedingly speechless. Really worthy of being called His Highness Prince Jean, because of a small girl. He actually renounced all the treasures inside this amethyst fish palace. He actually took this amethyst fish palace as a place for a stroll. Nangong Luyan's gaze swept towards them. These people immediately become silent. They lowered their head in reverence, not daring to whisper anything more. Ahead was a long and endless passageway, and on both sides of the passageway were rows of stone rooms right next to each other. There were so many that it couldn't be counted visually. It was estimated that a row was at least composed of several hundred rooms. In front of the passageway was erected a life and death monument. The left side of the monument was written a narrow escape, and the right side was engraved with heavenly gifted treasure. Below the small words were carved the rules for the life and death monument. Chapter 389, Amethyst Fish Palace 11. The life and death monument said that there were a total of 499 stone rooms. Every room was different. Good luck, maybe just going in, there would be a heavenly gifted treasure. bad luck, maybe just going in, would be confronted with a ferocious prehistoric beast. A room with heavenly gifted treasure was fortunate for you. You could come out at any time. However, a stone room with a ferocious prehistoric beast, unless you killed the defending beast inside. Otherwise, just wait until you were torn apart by the opponent. If the strength was equal, then when the amethyst fish palace once again disappeared, that person would also disappear with the palace. If the person was capable of resisting 100 years of starvation, maybe after 100 years, they could still appear. But how could this be possible? Therefore, the risk coexisted with the rewards. The higher the risk, the greater the rewards. Everyone could only pick one stone room to enter, and also no one knew what they would be confronted with. Some people shrank back, not daring to enter, while some people advanced bravely in order to get a heavenly gifted treasure. At this moment, a lot of people appeared to be hesitating. Each and every one of them was standing in front of the door to a stone room, pacing back and forth. They had an appearance of wanting to enter, but not daring to enter. However, Su Luo completely didn't have this worry, because she had the little divine dragon. The little divine dragon had always been obsessed with treasure hunting events. Now the little divine dragon appeared to be especially lively and glowing with spirit. His nose sniffed around the surroundings. Afterwards, he released his little short legs and ran ahead. The corner of Nangong Lian's mouth pursed slightly. He reckoned that the creator of the Amethyst Fish Palace also hadn't imagined that one day there would be this kind of puppy capable of identifying whether inside the room was concealed a treasure or not through its sense of smell. This was simply cheating, moreover, cheating with self-confidence and righteousness. Now the little divine dragon eagerly, with jolting buttocks, ran with lightning speed, while Su Luo and Nangong Luyan merely strolled along slowly, as if that little puppy running wild and happily was amusing itself and was unrelated to them. Finally, the little divine dragon stopped its footsteps and joyously halted in front of a door to a stone room. The stone room number was 123. In front of the door to this stone room now just happened to stand a person with a wonderful body and the appearance of a beautiful miss. This miss, Su Luo was very familiar with. It was not a stranger, but the Jade Lake's fairy. Now she was standing in front of the door muttering to herself, her hand holding a compass-appearing testing instrument. One could only see her long, shapely eyebrows nodded slightly. She dithered for a long time, without having decided if she wanted to go in or not. When the little divine dragon saw this miss standing in front of this stone room, immediately, he became anxious. The treasure inside this room could not let others snatch it away. Once the little divine dragon became anxious, it immediately bared its fangs at the Jade Lake's fairy, snarling fiercely. It had an ominous glint in its eyes, threatening her to leave quickly. In general, most animals had an instinct to protect their food, and the little divine dragon, compared to them, was even more high-grade with his instinct to protect treasure. The treasure he fancied. How could he let others be a step quicker and be first? The little divine dragon completely did not know how lovable the tiny him with his little face, taut in a deadly serious expression was. How very cute and adorable he looked. His heart was only focused on driving the person away. The Jade Lake fairy's contemplation was interrupted. She lowered her head to see a little puppy angrily howling at her. Taking another glance, she immediately recognized that this little bastard was Su Luo's spirit pet. At that time originally, an arrow could have shot Su Luo to death, but then this little thing came out and unexpectedly, outside of everyone's imagination, gnawed on that launched arrow. At that time, she had paid careful attention to this little thing. Now seeing it immediately, her selfish motives rose. This little thing was obviously not an ordinary puppy. Very likely, it was some kind of rare, magical spirit pet. However, it had already signed a contract with Su Luo. But no matter, as long as Su Luo died, the contract would automatically be lifted. Then this little thing would be hers. Now she could establish a good relationship first. Chapter 390, Amethyst Fish Palace, 12. The Jade Lake Fairy's smile was spread wide. She crouched down and good-naturedly smiled faintly towards the little divine dragon. She extended a slender, fair finger to tease him under his chin. "Little thing, is your original body a puppy dog? I don't believe it." A no word had just left her mouth. When her finger had extended under the chin of the little divine dragon, a red light flashed across everyone's eyes, and a bloody mist gushed out. "Ah!" The Jade Lake's fairy immediately issued a miserable cry, and her hand slapped towards the little divine dragon. Now the Jade Lake fairies, that forefinger from the right hand, that was originally going to tease the little divine dragon, half of it was gone. It was snapped off by one bite from the little divine dragon. The meat and the bone was neatly bitten off, the blood violently surging forth. It could clearly be seen how good the little divine dragon's mouthful of teeth were. The little divine dragon was from the most uncommon blood lineage of the divine dragon among the dragon race. After infancy, it would have the strength of a 5th rank. The him right now had at least had the cultivation of a 4th rank. Therefore, his speed was almost as fast as lightning. When the Jade Lake fairy's palm slapped towards him, he had long ago suddenly jumped up. His tiny little body jumped directly on top of the Jade Lake's fairy's head, with his 2 paws tightly grabbing onto the Jade Lake's fairy's hair. The Jade Lake's fairy was about to blow her top because of this little thing. She had thought that with one slap, she could eliminate this spirit pet. She never anticipated that the puppy's speed was this astonishingly fast. It was simply inconceivable. The Jade Lake's fairy grabbed towards her own head. She still didn't believe she couldn't even deal with a puppy. However, what made her want to spit out blood was that when she grabbed towards the puppy, his body rose like a bullet, and when she relaxed a little, he once again dropped down from up high. What made her collapse from fury was that he actually used her head as a tool for his game, stepping on top of it here and there, as if he was walking on stilts. He was also stepping on her very joyfully. The Jade Lake's fairy was so furious that she nearly passed out. Her always perfect hairstyle without a single strand out of place was trampled on by this puppy until it was simply beyond recognition. It was as disheveled as a beggar's. No, it was even inferior compared to a beggar's grandmother. How could the Jade Lake's fairy, who always posed as above the common people, endure this? The Jade Lake's fairy's heart became very fierce. She sent a severe palm strike to swat the little thing on her head. However, the little divine dragon was extremely nimble. Seeing that palm swat towards him, with a swishing sound, he jumped in front of the Jade Lake fairy's head and grabbed her hair, swinging back and forth in front of her body. The even more hateful thing was that his 2 little paws were still very lecherously stepping on the Jade Lake's fairy's boobs. Not far away, having long ago pulled Nangong Luyan to stand in a corner, Su Luo saw the position of the little divine dragon, and she was simply speechless. She held her forehead and looked to the sky. This was still an infant dragon, an infant dragon. Such a young age, and it was already this lecherous. Once it was grown up, how much more perverted would it be? The little divine dragon completely did not understand his owner's anguished wailing in her heart. Now this playing made him even happier. 1 minute, he swung to the back. Another minute, he again withdrew into the Jade Lake's fairy's sleeves. When the Jade Lake's fairy was about to grab him, he once again crawled out from under the Jade Lake's fairy's skirt. There was simply a myriads of playing methods he employed. There was nothing he wouldn't do, only those that couldn't be imagined. Moreover, this little thing, he really had a little wolf-like nature of a lecher. How to say it? Just when he was drilling in and out of the Jade Lake fairy's body, he still hadn't forgotten to use his sharp 2 little paws and thoroughly tear her clothing into tatters. Starting from when he hid in her sleeves, he had already split the Jade Lake fairy's sleeves from top to bottom into 2. When he dug out from under her skirt, he once again, conveniently in passing, tore the Jade Lake's fairy's skirt into pieces. Seeing this, the corner of Su Luo's mouth pursed, and with great difficulty, she shifted her eyes away. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.